Howdy, this is Cataluna, and you're listening to Lighting the Void with Joe Roop.
This is Crow 777, and you are listening to The Fringe FM. This is good. This is really good.
The Fringe FM has some of the best shows in paranormal, like Lighting the Void, The Secret Teachings, Into the Paranormal, Alex Exum, and so much more.
Yeah, baby!
We're live every night with hours of live original programming. Plus, we air some of the best shows in this genre, and we're not afraid to tell it like it is. Check us out at thefringe.fm. Follow The Fringe FM on Facebook and Twitter at The Fringe FM.
I'm Ryan Gable, and I want to remind you to keep your radio, phone, tablet, or computer tuned to the Fringe FM, and visit the website, thefringe.fm, to listen to the entire lineup of shows. You can also catch my broadcast, The Secret Teachings, Monday through Friday, beginning at 12 a.m. midnight U.S. Pacific Time, right here on the Fringe FM.
This is Paranormal News. I'm Jeremy Scott. A glitch knocked NASA's Curiosity rover offline for a weekend while booting up. Deputy Project Manager Stephen Lee says we're still not sure of its exact cause and are gathering the relevant data for analysis, but Curiosity has operated normally ever since. Scientists are working to forensically reconstruct what happened. Operations are suspended for the time being as NASA attempts to preserve data about the incident. When operations resume, Curiosity plans to drill into a space rock relatively close by. Curiosity landed on Mars in 2012. Virgin Galactic has ferried its first human passenger past the edge of space, depending on who you ask. The company's chief astronaut instructor, Beth Moses, rode in the passenger cabin and was accompanied by two pilots.
3, 2, 1, release. Fire.
VSS Unity rocketed the three-person crew to nearly 56 miles above Earth, where they got to experience a few minutes of weightlessness. That's about 10 times the typical cruising altitude of a passenger jet. The spacecraft accelerated to about 3 times the speed of sound.
Welcome to Space Scotland. Congrats, Steve. Welcome to the club, astronaut. Thanks, Space. I like this club.
Virgin Galactic is founded by Richard Branson. Competitor Jeff Bezos of Blue Origin soured the accomplishment, saying the internationally recognized boundary of space is at least 62 miles up, even though NASA considers 56 miles to be the boundary of space. Read these stories and more at ParanormalRadio.com. In for John Jeter, I'm Jeremy Scott, Paranormal News.
Message is being broadcast by the Department of Defense of the Republic. At 2 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, multiple unidentified objects were confirmed to have entered Earth's atmosphere.
Discovery Houston, 20 seconds to LOS T-Drift.
The first message that comes to you is you are a divine being. You matter. You count. You come from realms of unimaginable power and light, and you will return to those realms.
The vast stretches of the unknown and the unanswered and the unfinished still far outstrip our collective comprehension.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Broadcasting from Forest Tower Studios, all the way from the Deep South. Now, here is your host, Joe Roop.
Good evening. I'm Joe Roop, and this is Lighting the Void. It is Thursday night, March the 7th, and we only have 12 more days until the 2019 spring equinox. going to keep bringing that up until we get there. I cannot wait. We're live on the Fringe FM, KTLK Digital Broadcasting. That is the network, and our website is lightingthevoid.com. Follow us on social media. Just Google everywhere, YouTube, Facebook, Lighting the Void. Help us build it up. Thank you all for your support. If you want to call in tonight at any point in time, if and when we open the phones up, that call-in number is 1-800-588-0335. That's toll-free from the United States or Canada. Just be nice when you call in. And polite, because it's unscreened, which is kind of fun, right? And then you have the text-in number, which is 501-777-5631. Tonight, we're going to be speaking with Lance Mungia. The new film, I hope most of you have watched it because I did. The filmmaker, Lance, is the director of the recently released feature documentary, the new film, Third Eye Spies. And Third Eye Spies is fascinating. I've watched it, I think, 2.5. I'm almost on my third round. You can check it out at thirdeyespies.com. That's the website. You can also exclusively get the DVD and Blu-ray and sign up for the updates on the film at the website. All the links are there. There are a lot of extras as well on his YouTube channel, which is really cool. Lance's YouTube page under Lance Mungia. That's youtube.com, Waking Universe TV. You can grab it on iTunes and Amazon. It's available worldwide, pretty much across all digital platforms. And I left, if you go check it out, I left a review today. So after you watch it, make sure you leave a good review, like I know you're going to, because it's pretty awesome. Lance, welcome so much to the program, man. This is really cool because this is our stuff here, man. Astral travel, remote viewing. I love it.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you for having me on the show, man. This is awesome. It's funny. You reminded me it's my birthday, and I guess it's 7 days. I didn't realize it was coming up so fast. My birthday is on March 20th, which is, I guess, the spring equinox. So thanks for the reminder.
Yeah. That's cool. Your birthday's right close. That's a good time to have a birthday.
I've always liked that. Yeah, I've always liked that. So the first day of spring, the snow starts melting, everybody's, nice and happy and the sun's out. I mean, usually this year it doesn't, I don't know, man. I mean, it's like still freezing cold everywhere, it seems.
Yeah, we're about done with it. I hope, man. I can't wait to open the studio doors and let the crickets come in, I'm ready.
Yeah.
But, so this film is, this is the stuff that I wonder about all the time. I think I've talked about it so much on the show where people are like, move on. And I think that, but they're not really like that. I think people wonder that too. The military intelligence, like what do these people really know about remote viewing and the out of body experience and things of that nature? And, the truth is they, not only do they know about it, they've been working on it. They worked on it back in the 70s, and there's no telling what they're doing with it now. And your film really goes into the details with Russell Targ and the whole experience. I got to say, man, it was a blessing to see it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. As I was telling you before we started it, this thing was several years of my life where, I had a day job. I would work on this thing in my spare time and towards the end, full time, I've just been working on this in isolation. So nobody really got to, I haven't been able to talk to people like you and to hear you say, that you enjoyed the film and I really wanted to contribute something to the conversation about this topic. And that's kind of the thing that really kept me going for a long time. And we're in the top 5 now on the iTunes charts for documentaries, which is really blow mind. I mean, the fact that we could just come out of nowhere and it seems like people are really kind of embracing the film and sort of, I've always said the film sort of upsets your apple cart. It's like you have to kind of reevaluate your reality after you watch the film because you understand that this is a subject that was taken very, very seriously by the U.S. military, by a whole bunch of people with PhDs after their names. And we wanted to make something that was grounded and sober and really kind of said, look, this is the reality of what happened. And if you're going to accept this, then you have to open up your view of who you are as a human being and the world in general, because it makes the world a much more interesting place. And I love living in a world that's interesting and a little bit mysterious. And we don't quite know what it all means, but it definitely points to something that's not quite as mundane as sort of what science would have you think and sort of like what a lot of people would think.
The fact that it's jumped up to number 5 also implies to me that, people like you and I and others, we're not the only ones that think about this stuff. There's tons of people that think about this stuff and want to know what the military's up to. And of course, there's no telling, right? We don't know. And by the time the documents come out, which is something that they talked about in your film, when the documents come out, it's really cool to see this stuff because a lot of people feel, validated. Like, I knew that they were doing this. Here it is, right? And that's a good thing, I think.
Well, psychic abilities, intuitive impressions, gut feelings, whatever you want to call it, that's part of being human, right? I mean, the reason you and I are here having this conversation and not two other people is because somewhere along the line, our ancestors went left instead of right at that tree in the woods that, the tiger was hiding behind and we didn't get eaten, because your gut will tell you stuff that, you do. And the thing that struck me all the time, and the thing that actually initially kind of really got me interested in doing the film after having spoken to my producer and one of the stars of the film, Russell Targ, who was one of the founders of the remote viewing program that did this, was that they never had a problem convincing the top brass, presidential cabinet members, senators that were allies of theirs, titans of corporate industry, whatever it was. Russell said, the people at the top understand that the reason they're at the top was because at some point they were able to use their intuition and make gut decisions and do the right thing at a certain time, and things were just kind of worked out for them. He said, we always had problems with the middle managers, the guys like, that were sort of like the gateway and the middlemen, because those were the guys that always said no to stuff and didn't want to take risks. And science, any kind of success that you're going to have in life is always a risk, right? I mean, and so when I started to find out, the kind of allies that they had in Congress and other places to do this stuff, I understood, man, they were really taking this seriously.
Right.
This was a program used officially by the government for over 20 years, and they say that the SRI portion of it, Stanford Research Institute, where the research started, was about $22 million or so in that time frame. But that's kind of misinformation in a way, because it doesn't take into account the hundreds of millions of dollars that went into the military side, which would be Fort Meade. They had a program for many years in the U.S. Army intelligence, had a whole unit develop, with this, and they employed satellites and other intelligence assets and, people on the ground in different places to fact check what basically these psychics, for lack of a better word, remote viewers, as they were coined in the military, would come up with. And so, they had all of the U.S. government's resources at their disposal in a way where you and I could never do the same thing. Because if I say something's going on in the desert in Libya, well, who's going to fact check that? But the CIA, on the other hand, can just, point a satellite there, understand what's happening and confirm that data and understand that they're getting good results. And they found that again and again and again, somebody could just sit in a laboratory, close their eyes, imagine like a set of coordinates or some other descriptor of the target that they had been given to track, intuitively. And then they would, whatever unexpected images would come to their mind, they would just write that down, and they would draw maybe a picture if it was a location or whatever imagery they got. And they found that there's no limit to that ability, that people can literally look just about anywhere. And some people are okay at it. Maybe they can just kind of carry a tune, if it was a musical instrument, but other people are like virtuosos at it. Like there's a few people that are like Mozarts, and they can really get very detailed in terms of the types of information they could pull. But the most interesting thing was that really the people that they started with, a lot of them were just ordinary people. They weren't already practicing psychics or guys with big turbans on their heads and crystal balls or like weird, doing weird stuff or whatever. They were like literally like just other scientists that they would drag in from a lab or whatever. They did work with like one or two people who were psychics, but they actually found that those people were a lot harder to work with because they sort of brought some preconceived notions to the table. So,
I do wonder, though, Lance, and this is just me because I'm not that well educated when it comes to science. That's why my partner on the network is a scientist. Hopefully he might ask a few questions, but it seems like around this subject, even when it comes to astral travel, the physicists, physics, that part of science, that's the big thing, right? And I was thinking, I'm trying to make sense of how this works in physics, the only thing I can think of is quantum physics. Like, like Russell says, that we think consciousness is something where there's actually space between us, but really there's not. It's just some type of grand illusion. He makes some pretty profound points, in some of his interviews I've heard him talk about. It's pretty fascinating stuff.
It is. It's completely fascinating. The other thing that really struck me, we interviewed probably, 50 people for this documentary. I mean, not all of them by any means made it into the film. A lot of them are will start popping up on my YouTube channel as time goes on. I'm going to be cutting, pieces of interviews from a lot of the people who participated, but almost everybody that I interviewed that seriously has studied this topic, and you're talking about lifelong, scientists, a few philosophers, who also did, like people like Stephen Schwartz, who had a degree in philosophy and also in science. And so he kind of brought a certain poetry to the idea of what this could be. But the real reality behind this is that the people, after a while, started to talk less like undercover military guys or CIA scientists or, whoever, and start to sound more like a monk or something, in the way that they would describe the way the universe works. Because when you start to really unpack it and look at this, you start to understand, that you're connected in some way to every other point in space and time. And that's what every great religion has said. That's what every great, philosophy. The mystics have said that, like the ancient cultures from the Greeks to the, to the Hopis, to the Mayans, to on down the line, they all had a very similar belief. Like, in the Hindu religion, they'll say, namaste, which means where I end, you begin. In the Mayan, religion, they would say, the greeting, their standard greeting, I can't say it in Mayan, but it translates as, hello, I'm another version of you, and the only way that you can kind of start to make sense of all of this is to understand that your consciousness does not end with your own brain and your own skin. And there's a part of you that is fundamentally connected to every other person and to every other place, not just on the planet, but like everywhere. Because one of the things we talk about in the film is Ingo Swann, one of the best remote viewers they had, the guy who was actually the father of remote viewing, he actually coined the phrase early on in the process, and he said, he was able to see ice rings around Jupiter about 6 months before Pioneer 1 got there, which was the first human-made probe to go there. And he described this, drew a piece of paper with little rings around it, and everybody thought he got it wrong because they'd already seen Saturn and the fact that Saturn had these big rings. And he goes, no, this is Jupiter I'm looking at. And 6 months later, the probe confirmed what he said. So when he said that, nobody throughout all of human history, anybody, anywhere, knew that information. So where did it come from? You really got to ask that.
Fascinating, man. And he does it so fast. That's the one thing that impressed me about Ingo watching the film was, they're like, well, try to guess what's in this folder. He's like, come on, man, you're wasting my time. What do you want to know? Right. You want to know an object far away. You want to know something in space. Let's do this thing. I ain't got time for envelopes, and just pushes it out so fast. It makes me wonder, how the semantics work with this stuff. Like, for instance, how much are we blocking our psychic powers that we all could have? Because most of the good psychics I know, they just instantly tap into things most of the time.
Yeah.
And
I think
our own brain or something, our own junk just gets in our way,
Absolutely. I think that it's an imaginary skill. It's like the imagination is the engine of this, and your own inner voices, your own sort of thought processes. That's what they call that analytical overlay. Like, in remote viewing, it's all the junk that you sort of are just thinking about that maybe it could be, or you're guessing, or you're maybe nervous about it or whatever. And it's like the best thing you can do is kind of just get out of your own way. Joe McMoneagle, who is one of the best Army remote viewers, he told me that a lot of times, even today, he does a lot of remote viewing for corporations and businesses and like product planning and development and stuff. They'll ask him, like, look ahead 10 years and tell us what you see coming down the pike in our industry. And he says he'll sit there at night, he'll get tasked at something, and he's watching Jeopardy. And then when the commercial comes on, he'll kind of just like reach over and get his notepad, and he'll draw out a few things and, like kind of think about it a little bit, do it, and then put it down and go back to watching Jeopardy again. So it's not like an out of body experience or something where you literally are not present. It's actually exactly the opposite. You want to be 100% sort of in your conscious mind, because you're actually just pulling things, and then you're trying to record that data and keep it for posterity. So it's exactly. And the other thing they found is that this is actually something that it's easier to do big things than it is to do little things. Now that's so bizarre to me, but like when you mentioned Ingo Swann in the lab saying, like, why are you giving me stupid card tricks to do? I don't want to do this. There's something in parapsychology called the decline effect. And basically when your consciousness gets bored with something, then it becomes more and more difficult for you to use your intuition and get a correct result. If you're doing the same thing over and over, or if it's very like sort of minuscule and boring to you, it's kind of like your consciousness says, I'm not going to do this anymore. But if you're looking at the rings of Jupiter, or you're trying to find, a guy that's hiding somewhere in Hong Kong or whatever, that actually is somehow much more interesting to your subconscious mind, and it makes it easier to accomplish. And that's kind of why I think Stanford Research Institute and Russell Targ and Hal Puthoff and the people at SRI, as well as work that was done by Stephen Schwartz, who I mentioned is another researcher, like those guys accomplished really amazing things that are just blow mind, because they were thinking outside of the box. Like Stephen Schwartz and Hella Hammett, who was one of the SRI subjects, they found the lost temple of Alexandria, Egypt. It was buried under the sand in Egypt for thousands of years. And with the help of the Egyptian government, they actually went and they located this thing within 12 inches of where it had been buried, where they put the first stake in, to find this thing. That's incredible, but that's so hard to do. Nobody else can do that, but psychically they could, because it was really interesting somehow to the subconscious mind, and it made it easier to find.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. See, and that's what I love about this, like the pioneers that were into this. There's your documentary has tons of film and screenshots and interviews. It's really compelling. But then this one screenshot came up, and it's like the pioneers of this thing at the Stanford Research Institute. And I even saw one of my favorite heroes in the picture, which was Bob Monroe. And I was like, look at this. They're like the Indiana Jones of people, searching for truth. And then the government gets in it. It's like, it's really cool. It's one of the coolest things that's ever happened in our history, I think.
Oh, it is. It's one of those things like I liken it to did you see that movie Imitation Game about Turing? The guy that was the scientist that invented the computer, and it was originally invented. The computer was originally invented as a way to break, Nazi codes in World War II. I mean, it was something that they were using as a code breaking machine, and then they realized this is really, really useful, and then it just took off from there. And that's kind of the same way I think that you're going to look back at what was done at Stanford Research Institute, and I think that the magnitude of it is very similar to the development of the computer and then the internet and sort of bringing people together, because what it makes us understand is that there's this whole different layer to us as human beings and to sort of the way that communications can happen that we're not even – it's not even that we're not tapping into it. We're actually actively pushing it away. We actually, are becoming more and more wrapped up in our cell phones and our TV screens and, whatever, and we're not really using our sort of our own minds in the same way that we used to. But I think that people are going to look back at SRI and go, wow, like that was some seriously pioneering work they did. And not just, and to be fair, it was not just SRI. I mean, Bob Jean at and Brenda Dunn at Princeton, the Pear Lab and then Duke University and on down the line, a lot of different places have come up with the same results. And I get that a lot. People will ask me, well, if it was so great, how come other scientists are not also finding the same results? And then I kind of pause and I go, well, they are, but just that nobody's paying attention.
They forget about noetic science too, which in my mind is a very real science. There's a lot of data there. Absolutely. The Institute of Noetic Sciences that was started by Edgar Mitchell and now run by Dean Radin. Also, Daryl Bem, who is the professor emeritus at Cornell, has done work in this area. I interviewed all those guys for the movie, and Daryl didn't actually make it into the movie because I just didn't have enough time. But the work he was doing was fascinating. I mean, he does these precognitive experiments with college students in a lab where he'll show them
an image to get a certain result, and then measure the heart rate of it. And then the students will start to exhibit the same, heart rate, patterns and things seconds before they're shown another image that also is going to really shock them. So precognitively, they understand that this next scary thing or whatever is about to hit. And that work has been duplicated in something like 70 some labs all over the world. So like that's proof right there that like we're using our consciousness to sort of, in a way, predict the future. And it opens up a lot of questions. But the problem with science is that it's not connected. It's kind of like medicine. Like if you go to an elbow doctor, that elbow doctor doesn't know anything about your ear. You got to go to a different doctor, and that guy's not sitting there studying textbooks about ears because that's not his specialty. And it's the same thing in science. So when you ask somebody like Neil deGrasse Tyson, or even just any prominent
Bill Nye or somebody like that. Yeah, I was fixing to say the same thing. And I love those guys. They're profound scientists. I love listening to them talk about astrophysics and things. But if you notice something, you notice this, Lance. Like every time they get into a talk or something, somebody always asks them a question about the nature of reality, life after death, aliens, astral travel. You notice even it doesn't matter where they go. Somebody's in the audience that wants to push that subject on them. You ever notice that?
That's right. I know. And what's the answer? We don't know. We don't know. Or I don't think so. Or no, that's impossible. Or the evidence doesn't point to that. Or whatever. But it's like the issue is that they have not been exposed really to the data, and there's 100 years of great data on all this stuff. But they're not going to sit there and read it because they're busy in their own disciplines or whatever. And on top of that, there's been a ton of misinformation, probably I would say helped along by the intelligence communities, not actively done by the intelligence communities, but it's very easy to create a lot of misinformation about this sort of stuff because people are ready to think of it as a hoax. People are ready to think, oh, there's nothing to this. And just the way society is set up is to be very skeptical about stuff that we don't understand. We've seen it since forever, right? I mean, that's just the way it is. And so, for me as a filmmaker, my goal was to just be completely grounded in what the very best and most provable stories were, because I needed that firsthand testimony and the data that was coming out of CIA. See, when this stuff all sort of closed down in the 90s, originally it was all marked. Russell told me this, like he had seen documents that were marked automatic do not downgrade by CIA. And what that means is when you put automatic do not downgrade, then it never becomes declassified. Usually after a number of 20 years or something, then stuff automatically just gets declassified, and then you can access it through Freedom of Information Act. But that stuff was the stuff that they did was marked, put this on the shelf, put it next to the Ark, the Ark of the Covenant in the in that big warehouse at the end of Indiana Jones, and leave it there. Don't ever bring it out. But Russell and a few other people who had been involved made a lot of noise about getting it officially declassified, and Russell managed to get one little sliver of his own research declassified, and when he did that, he wasn't directly responsible for a lot of the rest of it being declassified, but I would bet money that somebody in CIA or in some government agency went, okay, so this guy just got this stuff declassified. Let's just hit the world with like 100,000 documents and just flood the gates open, let it happen. And then nobody will be able to pick through all of this useless data because there's a lot of like just useless stuff in there. And you got to really go through and pick out the gems and find, the real data. So,
right. Yeah.
But he did it though.
It makes me think about all of that stuff, the implications of what the CIA is doing, what they could possibly be doing now. We got to go into our first break, guys. We're here with Lance Mungia, thirdeyespies.com. If you haven't seen this documentary, I mean it, you really need to. We'll be right back.
Hola, Fringe listeners. This is Dave Cruz of Beyond the Strange, and you're listening to The Fringe FM.
Okay, nurse, let's get this man to the ER stat. Right away, doctor.
We see this every day. Heart attack or angina pain due to blocked and clogged arteries. Chelation can remove obstructions or blockages from arteries and help avoid painful and expensive surgery. Now there's Angioprim. It's a liquid oral chelation product that you take with juice. You start to feel the results fast. Angioprim increases blood flow all over the body, and that means more energy and strength to take on the day with less aches and pains. 60 years of research has gone into chelation, and Angioprim is the result. A safe and easy way to unblock your veins and arteries from buildup that slow circulation.
Paging Dr. Jones. Please report to the emergency room right away.
Log on now for a special radio offer from Angioprim. That's angioprim.com/radio. ANGIOPRIM. Angioprim.com/radio or call 877-882-7221. That's 877-882-7221.
Alex X. Hi, I'm Alex Exum, and you're listening to KTLK, The Fringe FM.
Live for 3 hours every Saturday night. It's a show that engages the mind, makes you think, and maybe even challenge what you think you know. Hi, I'm Jeremy Scott of Into the Paranormal, where we talk about topics that are anything but mainstream, somewhere between abnormal and paranormal. Bring an open mind and join us for Into the Paranormal, live Saturdays at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern on the Fringe FM.
Start your evenings with the Fringe FM long before those other shows get started. Exclusively live on the Fringe FM, hear the Quantum Hologram Matrix with the Reverend John Polk, Tuesdays at 5 Pacific, 8 Eastern. And our newest show, Spy Radio with Suzanne Ross, Wednesdays at 5 Pacific, 8 Eastern. Then stay up because we're burning the midnight oil well into the morning hour. The truth is out there, and so are we. Lock it in, the Fringe FM.
Who were the real ancient Egyptians? What is it about ancient Egypt that captivates us all? The critically acclaimed series Magical Egypt is back with all new episodes. Let Chance Gardner and company take you on another adventure through Magical Egypt in the new series Magical Egypt 2. Magical Egypt 2 attempts a forensic reconstruction of the science of the ancients through a study of ancient aesthetics. Also, the best researchers and authors in the field like John Anthony West, Graham Hancock, Laird Scranton, Robert Bouval, Lon Duquette, Aaron Cheek, and more join together to explore the topics of the esoteric and the hidden messages of the ancient Egyptians. Just go to magicalegypt.com right now and put in the code word FRINGE and get 10% off any download or order, including the groundbreaking original Magical Egypt series, as well as the new episodes in Magical Egypt 2. Also, check out the great work and the companion series at magicalegypt.com. Click the banner on the Fringe FM or go to magicalegypt.com and use the code word FRINGE and get 10% off your order today while it lasts.
Are you intrigued by Paranormal Talk Radio? You'll love the new Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now. The Paranormal Radio app. Free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
You know, food was different 60 years ago. It was minimally processed, free of pesticides. It was nourishing and healthful for your body. Today, GMOs, pesticides, herbicides, and heavy processing have depleted the nutrition of our food supply, which takes a toll on our health and energy. It's harder than ever to get the right nutrition. That's what Life Change Tea is meant to counteract. Our specially blended, powerful herbal formulas can give you more energy without caffeine. It's a mild cleanse, a mild daily detox. A good detox can help revive and bring back the energy of your youth. GetTheTea.com is the website. It'll cleanse you from the inside out with this herbal proprietary formula. Go to GetTheTea.com. There's no fillers, no GMOs. It's organic. Not available in stores. You must go to their website, GetTheTea.com. And their supplements are a great way to maintain your health. Read the testimonials on the website. Go to GetTheTea.com. That's GetTheTea.com.
All right, welcome back to Lighting the Void. We're here with Lance Mungia, ThirdEyeSpies.com, the new documentary, Rising in the Ranks on iTunes. You guys need to go check it out. It's something that you could do this weekend, over the weekend. Grab the, you can get a DVD, you can download it. I think it's even on YouTube. It's everywhere. It's worth the watch. I purchased a copy myself for reference so I can go back later anytime we have material on this subject. And that's a question I had for you, Lance, is how did, as a filmmaker, how did this come together? I mean, you were thinking, is this something that you always wanted to do? Because to me, it's just perfect the way it all came together.
I had actually, I've been a filmmaker for a long time. I started in the early 90s doing action stuff. My first movie was called Six String Samurai, which you can still find on Amazon Prime.
Oh, nice.
And it was like just this crazy, fairy tale action film. And then I went into because I was known for a certain kind of a visual style, I went into music videos for a while, and I did a little TV and had another experience making The Crow, Wicked Prayer, which was like a fourth one or something in the Crow franchise. And I didn't like sort of the corporate nature of making films, and sort of being like, third or fourth person on the totem pole. I mean, there's nothing you can really do about it. It's like, it's just when you're dealing with a lot of other people's money, you're jumping through a lot of hoops, and I really wanted to just kind of branch out and do my own thing. And so I sort of took a step back from filmmaking for a while and did some other things in the local community that I was in. And it gave me the time to sort of figure out who I was as a human being, because I had never really done that. Since I had graduated film school, it was just always about my career, always about, how am I going to do my career and everything. And it's ironic that it led me down the road to make this film, because that all came from me basically just sort of asking myself, who am I? What is this world we live in? What does this all mean? I'd had enough of my own sort of strange experiences, in life to understand that maybe there were some things that were not quite understandable, scientifically. And ultimately I started a show on my YouTube channel where I would invite people who sort of were on the cutting edge of science or on spirituality or whatever, and just bring them in and kind of pick their brains. And really it was just sort of an educational thing for me, because I was trying to figure things out. And so if I read a book and I liked it, I would reach out to the author, and sometimes they would come in and I would interview them. And that led me to Russell Targ, and
that is an awesome YouTube show, by the way. Just wanted to let the YouTube channel. I was on there too, watching some of your interviews. Great stuff, man. Anyways, didn't mean to interrupt you there.
No, thank you. I appreciate that. I didn't know if anybody's still watching that stuff.
Waking Universe TV, that's where it is on YouTube. Yeah, it's really great.
Yeah. And Russell had actually seen my first film, and he contacted me through a mutual friend, and I knew who he was because I had already been sort of really immersed in the subject matter by this time, and I knew about some of the early experiments, but I didn't know everything. But I was at a point in my life where I really didn't care anymore. I didn't care about what other people think of what I think. I didn't care about having to make the next Hollywood blockbuster, because I'd just been out of the industry for a while, and it's like I was just doing my own thing. And the technology totally changed, so the circumstances to make the film were there because it was a lot easier to make a documentary than it would have been when I first started, because back then it was all film. Now it's not. But more than that, also enough time had passed that the stuff had been declassified, and yet nobody had really come out and really done something with everybody involved. And when I met Russell, we spent some time hanging out, and he was telling me all of these different stories. And it was way more blow mind than I had even thought through the research that I had done. It was so much, in fact, that I thought, okay, this is just like too incredible, the stuff that he's saying that they were doing. Yet this guy is he's a legitimate scientist. He was a guy who was a laser physicist for years, but I would go to bed at night and I would wonder, like, man, it just seems like if me, who's already open to this kind of stuff and has already sort of experienced my own sort of odd things in the world that make me open to that, if I'm still skeptical, then we have to do a lot more work than just do some couple of interviews with a couple of people and put this together. So I went to Russell and I said, look, I'll do this if we can get everybody on record that we possibly can, because I think we need to treat this as if it was, a a crime scene or documenting the Holocaust or something, where you have to bring these people together and get as much firsthand testimony as possible while we can. And Russell said, well, a lot of these people have never come forward. I don't know if we can get them to come forward, but I agree with you because, we had just lost Ingo Swann, who was one of their best, remote viewers the year prior. And Russell was very concerned about both he passing away or other people that had been involved that were getting up in age, not being able to tell their stories. So what happened was over several months, I just started writing emails to different people. And Russell would sometimes make introductions, and then we'd go back and forth. And it wasn't that easy to get a few of these people that were the most key players to come forward, especially like the folks that were in the CIA. They weren't just doing remote viewing research. They have other careers and other reputations. And so to get them to come forward, I had to really convince them that, look, this is your shot to tell the story. And what I found again and again, that the events in the film are so unbelievable and so incredible that everybody that had been involved was still thinking about those events and still working them through their minds and still really wanted to talk about them. And so that's really what made it possible. They were just waiting for, I think, sort of a credible interpretation to come along, because there's so much sensational stuff out there. And I don't think they wanted to be taken advantage of in that way where it's like, oh, I'm just going to come in and, throw a bunch of stuff on the wall and put something together. And it's like, I really wanted to tell the story as humanly as possible. And people like Ken Kress came forward, who was the undercover physicist that was working for CIA at the inception of the program and kind of created this whole thing within CIA. And, he invited us up to his house at Yellowstone for like a week, and he was really like just so gracious. And it just became really apparent to me in talking to this guy that he was so awestricken by what had happened.
He was the undercover physicist, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And at the same time, he had his doubts because he's a CIA guy, and CIA guys always don't take things at face value. And there were a few things that had happened after the program where, he had been sort of quasi outed by one of the remote viewers, as you can see in the film, and who had gone to his church and was like sort of feeding information, and so it made him sort of not want to come forward right away. But I convinced him. I said, look, the whole body of this is so important to history, and that's the way I'd always approach it, was because it's like in another 20 years, these people may not be here, and all of that work would just get swept completely under the table and kind of just be this myth that kind of floats around.
Right.
And I wanted to hear it in their own words. And
well, you put an axe in that. I can tell you that right now. You put a total axe in that with this documentary. That is not going to happen from here on out because of what you did with this movie.
Thank you.
I mean, you know what I mean? There's lots of books on this stuff. There's a lot of people that know about it. I'm getting texts in about wanting you to know if you know anything about David Morehouse, who claims he was a viewer in the Stargate program. So before you answer that question, I just wanted to say a lot of people know about it, but your film really validates it, in my opinion.
Yeah. And I think, and I had heard some people talk about it. I had even read stuff before the program was declassified, because there was a lot of leaks about it. But the military's point of view about remote viewing was, no matter who leaks what, don't say anything. And this came directly from the head of the DIA program, Dale Graff, that I interviewed for the film. He said, I talked to Jack Verona, who was the head of Defense Intelligence Agency, and Jack said, just let the world think they're crazy. Because the minute you start like bringing guys in and prosecuting them for breaking their non-disclosure agreements and their top secret clearances and stuff because they weren't career intelligence officers like you would have in the CIA, these guys would retire. They were just army guys and go do other things. It was much easier just to let people sort of think that there's nothing to it than to actually get involved. Guys like Dave Morehouse, I believe he was involved, and I'm unfortunately not as familiar as I probably should be with him. I picked up his book once, and it looked really interesting, but it was very, very long, and I just didn't have time to kind of go through it. And there's a lot of really good remote viewing instructors that are out there today. Lori Williams, who appeared in our film, is one. She's written some great books. She runs a company called Intuitive Specialists, and she's the lady at the end of the movie that was teaching this like kind of class of Russians and how to do remote viewing. And Lori is part of this crop of new kind of people who are out who learn from the original Army guys. I want to say that Dave Morehouse was involved in the Army program, but overall, they were kind of the first generation, and they taught a whole bunch of other people that are out there. And now all of those other people, including some of the originals, like Joe McMoneagle, have made an industry out of this, and they're out there, really on the down low, working for corporations, working for police departments,
Right.
finding missing people, there's an industry to this, and it's being used. And I think that if we were going to ask ourselves, is it still being used by government today? That's probably how. Like they're probably using independent contractors, and it's really sort of very low budget compared to having large scale programs. I think a lot of the larger scale programs took years to sort of become legitimized and find their allies. And there was a giggle factor involved where when leaks would happen and then it would come out that the government was spending big money basically spying on the Soviet Union using psychics. That was embarrassing to the political side, and they also got a lot of blowback internally just from the religious side as well. Like there were a lot of very sort of fundamentalist people within the government that were saying, like this is not something we should be doing. This is the devil's work. All of that kind of stuff. Yeah, and it's like again, it's like we're back to Galileo. It's like let's put him in prison because he invents the telescope, and all of a sudden we realize we're not the center of the universe.
Yeah, I think that's changing though. But maybe that's just because I hang out with and talk to more people like you, But I think we are kind of evolving with that. There's healthy skepticism going on now too. A lot more of that. There's a lot more less evangelists and stuff. Something too that I was thinking about watching this film is it really made me think about the implications of what the CIA does, like how they work, how they operate. Even when you were at Yellowstone and then he was out there, the physicist was out there fly fishing, right? And I remember right when I was thinking about that, he said, the water's a little bit murky in here and there's tons of fish, but the water's murky. So you got to throw a bait out that's bright enough so they'll see it. So they'll all come to it. And I was thinking, I wonder if that's how, it's kind of like disinfo at its core, right?
Yeah.
So
when you when you deal with guys that were in that sort of intelligence community, and this is really so many of these people, you never know what they're not allowed to say because they're not saying it. You never know if something is being tweaked, because that's the narrative. But yeah, because it's like peeling away layers of an onion, and you tend to get like more and more layers as you spread out and talk to more and more people. There's a lot of connection in excuse me, to the remote viewing community and the UFO community, for example. You start to see that as you sort of branch out and talk to different people. And Hal Puthoff, who was Russell's partner, was also part of the To the Stars Academy and the whole Robert Bigelow thing. You probably have talked about this on your show. Like it came out that the Pentagon had a UFO tracking, threat assessment program and everything. And so Hal was a part of that, and he actually left the remote viewing program kind of at the height of their success. And he went out to Austin and he started this free energy device research program, in Austin, where he was researching energy from the vacuum. Brilliant physicist. And when I interviewed them, and how he couldn't talk about any of the UFO stuff that he was doing because it was going on at the time, but everybody else around him and around Kit Green, who was one of the other people who was also involved in To the Stars Academy, would say, I think Kit and Hal are working on some kind of UFO thing, and I would ask Kit, like I'd say, because I'd call up Kit and I'd be like, okay, so I'm ready to come out to Detroit. Can I interview you? And he'd say, oh, no, I can't. I'm so busy. I'm going to be out in Austin with Hal, and we just don't have any time. I said, oh, if you're going to be with Hal, that's great because I can interview you guys together. It's like that's even better. And he goes, no, we're much too busy. Well, what are you working on? Can't talk about it.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And so you never know what you're really dealing with when you deal with the intelligence community. But I will say that no matter who we talk to, be it Kit, be it Ken, any of the other physicists, everybody had a real desire to get this on record in the scientific community, because I think all of them felt like this was in danger of sort of disappearing. So there's a real sort of, I think, hunger in that community for this to be taken seriously. And I think there's a real many year, very strong kind of dogmatic, skeptical community that doesn't want it to be taken seriously. And I'm sure that the CIA itself and other government agencies, they're perfectly happy with that. You know, Ken told me repeatedly, like we'd be driving around Yellowstone and he was showing me the park and stuff. And I kept asking him, like, do you think they're still doing it? And he goes, well, you know, I don't know, but I will say that the CIA is completely the wrong place to do scientific research and expect that somehow is going to be embraced by the scientific community. You know, it's a great place if you just want to use it, you know, because it's very useful operationally. But to understand how it works, that's the real missing link here, you know, is that you can't come up with a working hypothesis of what's going on with this phenomenon just any more than you can with the UFO phenomenon.
The only people that know are them. They got all the tools, all the instruments, you know. It's almost like we know they got it. We know they're doing it. We don't know how deep the layers are. Even when I was watching the film, and I was thinking, okay, that's just the thing that kept running through my mind. Okay, what is the CIA doing here? Well, are they just laying back and watching this, right? And then they go out and they get this other guy that they don't ever say who he is and use him as kind of a weapon while they're observing these guys. You know, you just start thinking about all that stuff. I'm pretty sure it goes deep.
Oh, if you were paying attention, there's a little known part of the film that people haven't really referenced too much yet. But and you know, Ken Kress had to have all of his questions vetted by CIA. You know, we actually had to submit the questions ahead of time, so he was to be sure that he wasn't. And there was a lot more he wanted to talk about. And he said, you know, I've submitted a whole second batch of questions, and I wanted to do it in two parts because there was another part that I wasn't completely sure about, and they never got back to me on that second part yet. And you know, just the other day when the film came out, I actually wrote him and said, you know, hey, the film's out. And at the end of the conversation, I said, did they ever get back to you about that other stuff you couldn't talk about? I didn't get a response. but
does it have anything to do with an unnamed person?
I'm sure it has to do with a lot of unnamed people. I mean, you know, they were doing a lot of stuff. You know, Hal Puthoff told me about 70% of what they did at SRI for the CIA and other government agencies has never been declassified. So wow, you've basically got a mountain of stuff that probably is even more amazing than what was in the film that they still can't talk about today. And you know, you've got people like you know, Joe McMoneagle, and I think a lot of the larger sort of celebrity kind of remote viewers that are out in the world today. I believe them when they say they're not like officially involved with any government program, but a lot of the lesser known people, like you're saying. You know, the CIA was training psychics inside the CIA to do this type of work. You know, like undercover, like they would send somebody out to SRI under the guise of just being there to observe and, you know, kind of like monitor. And then ultimately those people would learn the techniques and then bring it back into CIA. Because CIA did not trust them. Matter of fact, there's a great story that's not in the film that Hal Puthoff tells about one of those people. Her name is Francine, and Francine is, you know, you can see the remote viewing that she did was her very first remote viewing of like a merry-go-round, and you know, it's towards the end of the film when Ken Kress is talking about the programming having ended, and he talks about the fact there were a few people within CIA that was sort of doing very competent remote viewings aside from the other stuff when the program ended. And we wouldn't know about what happened to those people afterwards. It's like Ken left the program at that point. So he sort of said, you know, as far as I know, it just ended. But Francine, when she came out there, she was so skeptical about remote viewing. And what Russell and Hal Puthoff would do anytime somebody was coming out there acting like they wanted to close the program down or were skeptical, and they would say, I want to see a remote viewing. Russell would say, okay, well then in that case, today you're the remote viewer. Sit in the chair. You get to do the remote viewing. And time again, people would say, oh, that's ridiculous. I'm not going to do this. And then they would find out that they could do it. You know, and Russell said that was very, very much by intent, because if they would have just shown them something, then those skeptical people would walk out going, okay, well, this was a hoax. They obviously made it up. This is obviously not, a planned thing. But Francine comes in and, they have her do a remote viewing. She gets it right. And then she automatically thinks, okay, this is bogus. I'm a CIA agent. They must be, they must have planted like little subliminal bugs in the chair, like very low frequencies, and they must be feeding me information. So she demands like earphones, and she says, take the chair out of the room. And she says, okay, we're going to do it again. And then they did it a second time, and she got even better results. And then she said, okay, maybe there's a bug in my clothing or something. And, I don't want to monitor in here with me because there's the person that's with me may be like somehow feeding me verbal clues that I don't understand or whatever. So I don't want anybody else in the room. And I want the door shut. And they wound up like having to like tape the door shut around her to make sure that like no one was going to get in and out because they didn't trust her either. And there's all this back and forth. And they come back and she's literally like in her underwear, on the floor, covering her ears, trying to do this because she was so convinced that they had been conning her somehow. Yeah. But they kept bringing her out and showing her that she got it right again and again. And ultimately she became a big advocate for the program. And she was one of the people that went back into CIA and sort of took the information with her. So, the moral of this whole story is that the best people they got were just people, like there were people who were highly successful in other areas, people who were grounded, they were not like wild-eyed heretics, running around. They were basically just people who were very well liked, balanced, open-minded, and those were the types of people that they would look for the program.
Right. Yeah, and it's not all rainbows and butterflies, too, in a lot of ways when you start thinking about it, especially in the film where one guy ends up, passing away because he got poisoned somehow. And you start thinking about, you can't really say, oh, well, this is what happened, but it's kind of a big coincidence to me. And you start thinking about what is intelligence, which, I'm not speaking bad or good about them, but they're intelligence. What are they willing to do, right? They're already willing to do just this that's exposed that they've let us see because they let us publish it, which to me implies that they've gone much deeper than that right now.
I think that when Ken, I was shocked when Ken Kress came back with his questions approved from CIA. They approved every question. I had given him questions, and then he added a bunch of questions of things that he wanted to talk about, and a lot of that stuff's not even in the film because there's just not enough time. But all of that stuff came back approved, and I thought, man, this either means A, that the CIA just doesn't care at all, or it means that this sort of thing is so stovepiped. It's like a term in intelligence where it's like there's a, sort of just a very narrow slice of people that knows that a thing is going on, and they keep it that way intentionally, right. So that even it's not like one big monolithic government. It's like you have these little slivers of things, and one program doesn't know what another program is doing in intelligence. And my suspicion is that even within CIA, if you asked anybody now in CIA, for the most part, they would say, nah, come on, that stuff. What are you even talking about? I don't know anything about it. And they'd probably be correct, because if it's going on, it's happening in a very, very tightly controlled area. And it's not doesn't have the same kind of oversight that it used to have back in the day, because they don't need it. They've already shown that it works. They already know it's effective. They already know that they're susceptible to it. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the work that the government did was to try to find countermeasures to sort of deflect this sort of thing, because they knew that the Soviet Union had like 70 different labs all over Russia, basically using psychics and people who could do PK and like turn off machines and all this kind of stuff. And they were using all of this, and so they knew that it was being taken seriously when they started this. And I seriously doubt that when the Cold War ended that all of that just completely disappeared. I think it's just being used in a different way.
Right, exactly. Yeah, even some of the stuff they were talking about, remote strangulation, to me, and that was just like experimental. Once it, because you don't see pioneers like Robert Monroe and Russell Targ, people like that. Eventually, I don't think, and this is just my opinion, is that the CIA is going to keep using them. They could, but in my mind, they use people like that to figure it out, publish what information they feel is safe. But meanwhile, in the background, they got their own little group of people we'll never know about. That's what.
That's
I think.
right.
You know, that's what I think is going on. We'll be right back, guys, with Lance Mungia. ThirdEyeSpies.com. Go check it out and stay with us.
Jeremy Scott here from Into the Paranormal, and I'm back live Saturdays at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, right here on the Fringe FM.
You're listening to Lighting the Void Radio.
If you are interested in occult subjects, psychic abilities, symbols, tarot, witchcraft, magic, or anything similarly related, my book, Occult Arcana, will provide you with a truly objective overview of these topics and more. Written in anything but modern language, Occult Arcana was compiled to help researchers balance their quest for a better understanding of the meanings of and in such studies. Occult Arcana is available in softcover and digital form from www.thesecretteachings.info. All copies can also be autographed if requested. That's Occult Arcana from www.thesecretteachings.info.
Hi, this is Aaron Hunter, host of Real Paranormal Activity, the podcast where we tell real paranormal experiences of people from around the world. And we also conduct interviews with authors, investigators, psychics, and mediums. Real people, real stories, real fear. Thursdays at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern on The Fringe FM. See you then.
Yohoy there. Gigi here.
And I'm Cortana, and we're going to bring you on a journey through all things paranormal, metaphysical, ufology, and even psychedelic on our show,
Shift Happens, live, Fridays at 7 p.m. Pacific. That's 10 p.m. Eastern on The Fringe FM.
And remember, kids, don't feed the Archons. Feed ducks instead.
Duck up.
The Fringe FM isn't just a radio station. We also provide services for all your audio production needs. If you are interested in live radio or pre-recorded podcasts, we're here to help. We even do audio enhancements and voiceovers if needed. If you want to do a podcast or live radio show and even want the option to syndicate on terrestrial radio, from simple audio file enhancement to live production and call screening, we have you covered. We have worked with some of the best professionals in the business in order to provide coaching instruction for content creation, show structure, and more. Contact The Fringe Digital Media for more at info@thefringe.fm. That's info@thefringe.fm. Or call 501-777-5631 for a consultation.
Introducing Shadow Light Tarot from Waking Canvas, The Fringe FM's new contributing artist, Eric Tesey. This hand-illustrated black and white self-published deck serves as a reinvention of the tarot never before witnessed. Each of the several suits of this 88-card deck lineup form an infinite panoramic scene. Even the included visual companion guidebook is entirely hand-illustrated, cover to cover, with beautiful visuals and esoteric symbols and artwork. The newly released deck comes in a custom magnetic box with its own travel pouch. The Shadow Light Tarot Premium Deck and its travel-sized mini deck Wonderlight Tarot are both available now from WakingCanvas.com. If you use the code word FRINGE, that's F-R-I-N-G-E at checkout, you'll receive an extra 10% off your entire order. To discover more, including a free reading and time lapses of all the illustrated artwork, make your way over to WakingCanvas.com today. That's WakingCanvas.com.
All right, welcome back to Lighting the Void. I'm your host, Joe Roop. We're here with Lance Mungia from ThirdEyeSpies.com, the documentary Third Eye Spies, rising in the ranks on iTunes. And I don't want to harp on this too much, but it's just something I can't stop thinking about, Lance, that the implications of what the CIA does. And, in the film, there's a part that discusses how a man died. And, to me, it just looks way too obvious, like what they're willing to do to keep things secret. It makes me think about all that stuff. They didn't even do a medical examination on this guy who was part of this program because for some stipulation, but it was, to me, and this is just me, it was kind of obvious. I think they took him out. Like the CIA's got a heart attack gun, and that was a long time ago. I mean, what did they do now to take people out,
They make you watch your cell phone all day and really bad TV and eat a lot of popcorn.
Right. Yeah.
No. I think that it's very, very suspicious. Their very best remote viewer, Pat Price. This is a guy who could literally psychically stick his head inside a safe, read the contents of the documents inside. And he said, I would just put my hand in the filing cabinet. Words would pop into my mind. I would write them down. And he was writing down highly, highly classified secrets that nobody knew. And that freaked the CIA out. It freaked not just CIA, every intelligence agency out, because this guy was getting information almost accidentally because he was targeted on something totally different. And he just thought, oh, this really highly classified military NSA site that's over here looks much more interesting psychically because there's a whole lot of consciousness that's trying to cover it up. And anytime you have a lot of consciousness trying to cover something up, it's much more interesting to somebody who's a remote viewer because it's easier to see. And he was able to do that. And so that caused chaos within intelligence because they went, wait a minute, you mean I could have this like highly secretive document on my desk and a psychic back in Moscow could be reading it? That's like, whoa, we need to really seriously investigate this. And they gave that guy harder and harder tasks. And they eventually stole him away from Stanford Research Institute where he had been doing these tests. And they secluded him on a farm in Virginia and had him under 24-hour surveillance as he was doing work. And they had him looking into foreign embassies and terrorist training camps and all this kind of stuff. And he was coming back with information that nobody in intelligence had in the United States. So they were like, okay, either this guy's a Soviet spy or he's in league with like the director of CIA somehow and they're pulling a prank or he's for real. And they ultimately came to the conclusion that this guy was for real because they gave him something so hard to do, which you'll see in the film, that nobody else could have done it. And about 4 months after that, he died. Now, the guy had a heart condition. Maybe he died of a heart attack. A lot of people think maybe the KGB did him in, because the Soviets were tracking everything that this military unit and that Russell and Howell and everybody at the Stanford Research Institute were doing very closely. And we know that because people even defected who had been watching them and came to Stanford Research Institute and wanted to work with them. So they found all of this out. But Pat was so good. He was better than anybody else because reading is a very, very hard thing to do when you're doing remote viewing. It's not something alphanumeric symbols and things like that. They just don't translate. It's much more of a sort of an emotional, sort of a feely kind of a thing. It's like you get impressions, but not like something so literal. But Pat could do that. So they also found out that maybe he hadn't been 100% agreeing with his non-disclosure agreement. He had been feeding information to his church through confession. They were very nervous about what he was saying. And what do you do with a guy like that? Yeah. Do you bring, if Superman could be a double agent, you're going to bring him into the military court and say, well, Your Honor, we have this guy who's a psychic who can read code words and we really think you ought to lock him up. Nobody's going to believe you. And it was too highly sensitive, highly classified, couldn't do it. So if they found out that this guy might be a problem to them, if this guy could read nuclear codes on the president's desk, if he could tell you where the president was going to have lunch next week, then that's a threat, and once and the CIA already had their own operators that knew how to do this. So I don't know. I mean,
there is a point in the film though, I don't know if it was the film. It probably was because I watched so many things today. Where this guy and you brought that up during break from I guess he was from the KGB or a different intelligence agency that admitted, he went on national TV and admitted that they would find the way they would take people out is they would get their medical records and find out where their weaknesses and take them out to where it would look like it was a natural thing. And
that's right.
Even talked about, well, can you give us an example? And he said, yeah, I worked on a mission where we did it, where a guy was working on remote viewing or psychic stuff for the U.S. military. And I'm thinking, come on now. I mean, that's a pretty big coincidence.
That's right. And there's another character that worked in that same program in the movie that says that Uri Geller, who says that, he disagrees with that because he says that intelligence agencies don't take people out like that because they try to turn them because they're useful. And why do you want to kill the goose that laid the golden egg? So that's the devil's advocate argument. But on the other hand, if you have your own guys that are already being useful, right, and there's another guy working on the other side that is even maybe more useful, but you can't necessarily get to him, I mean, they did have like a heart attack gun, and you're right. That is a very common thing in sort of the shadier parts of intelligence in every country is they're going to say, okay, if this guy's got a heart condition, maybe we can exacerbate that. If he's got some other thing, maybe we can work with that, and so it's possible that basically he just became sort of a liability, and we'll never know because, we just don't know. I mean, so we'll see. But
the biggest thing skeptics say a lot of times, though, Lance, is they say, humans' nature, some of these things just can't be real because it's in human nature. It's not to keep a secret, especially when the more people know about it, the harder the secret is to keep. But when you really look at this stuff and see how they operate, I don't think that's the case. I think they can keep secrets pretty well, and they cover stuff up pretty well.
They can keep secrets, and that's where it comes back to this idea of stovepiping. You've got like a bunch of people in one specific program in U.S. intelligence, and all of their funding and all of their chain of command is a very narrow stream of people, and nobody else in the agency's work knows about it. This is something I learned in making the film when I understood that. It's possible that CIA allowed these questions to be answered by some of the people in the film because they're not read in. Like even CIA now is not read in on what's happening because maybe one little tiny sliver of it is, but when they get good information from a remote viewer, and that gets handed off to satellite guys and analysts to look at the data and stuff like that, they may not ever know where that data came from. They just know that there's data and they're supposed to look at it, and there's only maybe one guy that knows. And look at the Manhattan Project. The Manhattan Project was one of the hugest scientific undertakings in the history of the world. Developing the nuclear bomb. Did it leak? Nope, not until the bomb went off.
Right.
So it's like it is definitely possible to keep a secret, and same thing is true with the UFO phenomenon. And the UFO phenomenon is kind of like a flip side to the remote viewing phenomenon because the same tools of misinformation are employed. The same sort of skepticism in the community, and most definitely the same stovepiping and sort of interagency secrecy where the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. When you talk to Hector Elizondo, who ran that ATIP program, for the Pentagon studying UFO stuff, the way that they closed that program down and the obstacles that he had sound exactly like what happened at SRI and within CIA and the sort of interagency squabbling that was going on, because not everybody understands the full extent of what's going on. And so it becomes very easy to sort of get lost in the details of it because they're not clear to people, and even within intelligence itself. So it's something that is a giant Rubik's Cube and is very hard to figure out. If that's the way they like it.
Yeah, exactly. And if there is a system of power that's trying to keep us in control, like a lot of us believe, the one thing I would think is that they don't want us to be able to, not all of us anyways, to be able to tap into these things. Because think about it. If you live in a world or a society where you had tons of citizens that could do this, it would literally change the planet in the most dramatic way. You couldn't control people. They know the truth. They can remotely view whatever. So there has to be a mishmash of just tons of disinfo. The more I think about this, the more I wonder just how complex the disinformation goes sometimes.
Absolutely. I mean, but at the same time, let's be fair and say this is not an absolute ability. One of the reasons why it's not just mainstream accepted is that it involves your consciousness, my consciousness. When we look at something, I may get a different result than you will. I may be better, or you may be better, or our own filters of our own minds and our imagination are at play. So you can't replicate this every time, and it's not like it's a turnkey skill that just anybody does automatically. Oftentimes people get the best results the first time they do something like this, because there's no preconceived notion, there's no pressure. They don't even believe it, but they try it. Maybe somebody has given them permission. Maybe somebody listens to this show right now and says, "Oh, maybe there's something to this," and they try it and they do it really well, and that scares the heck out of them.
And then it does actually. I had a listener do that to me because I said, "Hey," on the show, I said, "Let's try to remotely view the studio," because I haven't shown a lot of pictures of the studio. And a few people guessed it, and one person pretty much nailed it. And I was like, whoa, that's kind of freaky. Like, are they looking at me right now? Yeah, it does freak you out a little bit.
You can't take away somebody's worldview without creating a different one. Somebody has to have ground to stand on. And that's so important to this kind of a thing. And when you sort of understand that this is even possible, yeah, what does that do to are we going to have like an office of precog crime or whatever, like in Minority Report? are you going to start arresting people because they might commit a crime? What does that do to the odds in Vegas? And by the way, one of the extras for the film that's on iTunes is a 20-minute mini documentary that I made following a group of gamblers around Vegas, and a physicist, Marty Rosenblatt, with the Applied Precognition Project. They are getting about 75-80% with predicting outcomes in sport events using remote viewing. Wow. Russell Targ played the stock market and got like 9 out of 9 times corrected. Was the market going to go up a little, up a lot, down a little, down a lot, using precognitive remote viewing. But it's difficult to keep doing that all of the time. It's that same decline effect I was talking about. Like after a while, your consciousness either starts to get the pressure of it, because of the odds, or the boringness of it, and that actually causes the sort of efficacy of this to go down. But the bottom line is, you're right. What does it do to the world when they find out about this? And all of a sudden, there are no more secrets. Like all of a sudden, nothing is really that secure. I thought a lot about this because I thought to myself, I'm not looking to like go put an above nuclear weapon in some terrorist hands that, now can like get a hold of something and do it, and I thought about it and I thought, well, number one, governments already know about this. Anybody, knows about this. It's like, this is not like new information to people who really are in the know. It's been around for a long time. Mm-hmm. But on top of that, there's a statement that Hal Puthoff made that I love in the movie. This is not in the movie. This was just in conversation with him. I think I have it on film, but I didn't use it. He said, ignorance does not intelligence and knowing what your enemy is thinking does not lead to war. Ignorance leads to war. Not knowing what your enemy is going to do, misinterpreting information, that leads to war.
Fear of the unknown. And so, yeah,
right. And so a better intelligence tool is not necessarily a bad thing, and you know what? If it keeps everybody on their toes a little bit, even better, because my goal in making this film, all of this military stuff and the intrigue and all that stuff is awesome. But what I really wanted to do was I did want to upset your reality a little bit and make you go, wait a minute, so there's something to this. Then that means I have to rethink what I think of the world now. And I love what Skip Atwater in the movie says. He says, maybe more than anything else, this is just part of human evolution. Maybe we're just evolving as a species. And as we realize we are connected, we become more connected. Maybe we like our neighbor a little bit better. Maybe we're not so angry the next time somebody cuts us off in traffic. Maybe we have a little bit more empathy for people we don't even know. And if that's the case, then that's awesome. And that's what Russell Targ, who was again the producer of this movie, has fought for his entire adult life, because the hardest thing for him was to get a lot of this information and look at this data and understand that he was seriously onto something in a scientific lab.
Yeah.
And not be able to talk about it.
I can tell he was passionate about it. He said, this might be the last time I get to tell the story. And you can look in his eyes how important it is to him to get the story out. Yeah.
I'll tell you, I spent a lot of years with Russell now at this point. And the most pressure I got from him was, hurry up. I want to see this happen before I go. He wanted this so much because he had been trying so many different times. I mean, he went to Wall Street and did those silver future experiments I was just talking about because, he wanted to prove to the world that what he had been doing in the lab and in classified circles was something that should be discussed in public circles also. And you had like little flashes of mainstream attention. There's like news broadcasts from the 80s and stuff. But by the 90s, it was just like nobody was talking about this stuff, even though the work was still going on. The sheer force of sort of dogmatic scientific and religious skepticism just kind of drove this more and more underground. And I think there's a lot of people who are in the status quo, both in sort of corporate land and in government land, that don't mind that so much. They actually kind of like that because exactly like you said, it's like it's so much upsets the apple cart to understand that the rules of the game are not what we think they are. Yeah. But it could be the best thing ever. I mean, it's a tragedy. It's like, this is something that's not new. This is not new. This has been done since the time of the Romans, the Greeks, the Native Americans before that, 100,000 years before that. This is something that has always been part of human history. In the time of Christ, there was an author, philosopher by the name of Patanjali. I'm probably not getting the name right, but he wrote something called the Yoga Sutras, and he said, and this is in the Hindu religion, he said, as you're on your path to enlightenment, as you're doing your meditations and your work, you may notice that you're sensing people that are far distant, objects that are hidden, things that are in other times and other places, but don't worry about it. It's just, something on the road path to enlightenment, and, don't overly concern yourself because that can actually mess up your path, but you'll notice it. And, this is something that just is part of who we are. And more than anything else, that's what always drove me forward. And I did a lot of this work myself, I wasn't paid for it. This is just something that I did because it was something that I felt had to be done.
It's your soul work. You can definitely tell it's your soul mission, man, for sure.
Yeah. Thank you. I'd like to hope so. And I'd like to hope that we do upset the apple cart a little bit and that people do look at this. And I'll tell you, I was not a true believer going into this. I was not looking to prove some point or make some big statement. But just alone, the history was so fascinating that I knew no matter what, we would have an interesting documentary. And the first time I showed up at where there was going to be a remote viewing being done was in Vegas. And, the International Remote Viewers Association every year has this big conference. And Russell got in front of a crowd of about 100 people, and he talks them through doing a first-time remote viewing. He basically just says, okay, somebody is going to be hiding somewhere in Vegas. We don't know where. But I want you to think about this person that we have sent out. His name was Paul Smith, a well-known remote viewer. He's hiding, and he's wearing a GoPro right now as he's walking someplace in Vegas. Just close your eyes. Imagine where Paul is, and describe the first unexpected images that come to your mind. Whatever, just seems odd or out of place, describe it and then draw that. And I'm walking through the audience with a DSLR, and I'm like going from person to person. And I had permission to be there, so they knew I was there. So I was scanning each and every one of the drawings that were being done. And I started to see all of these similarities. And I was really nervous about this because I hadn't actually at that point seen remote viewing done firsthand. I'd only been hearing stories about it. And I thought to myself, man, if I show up to here at Vegas, and first of all, it's a big deal to go to Vegas and get a hotel room for a week and bring cameras and all this stuff. And I said, what if it doesn't work? What am I going to do? I'm going to have to put that in the film. I'm not going to completely ignore stuff that doesn't work because, I'm not looking to make some broad spiritual to sell a point.
Narrative.
Yeah, right. I'm a documentary filmmaker. This is what I'm going to do. And sure enough, as I'm walking, I'm seeing people, person after person is like writing like little triangles on the paper, like flowing water, waterfalls, fish. One person drew a little coin fountain with a waterfall coming down. And I didn't get all the way through the room during the course of the 15 or so, 20 minutes that they were doing this. But by the end, Paul Smith comes back in the room. He's got his GoPro. He takes it off. They put the footage on the screen and on the big screen. And it's a pro bass fishing shop in Vegas with these like glass, big, tall windows that are like triangular. So people have been drawing and all of these fish tanks and a giant waterfall that goes down into a coin fountain. Wow. And I was blown away by that because so many people got that right. And then I was like looking at all of the drawings that were done afterwards, and person after person after person got waterfall, got like these key things that were there, little obscure things about the location. And I was like, wow, this
is amazing.
Works. Yeah, it worked. And that sort of just made me go, okay, this is not just some story about some older people who did something a long time ago and it was a fluke. This is ongoing today. And it's just that it's not something that we really think about, and it's not something that we choose to make a part of our lives. And that's too bad. Because it's not something that should be scary or should be making you different or whatever. It's just part of a spectrum of things that are abilities that we can access as human beings.
The same types of thing happened to me with astral travel. When I first picked up Robert Monroe's books, I was like you. I was thinking, no way, this isn't possible. And he, the way he did it, he scientifically approached it, kind of like journaled things. And I started attempting these things myself and had a few experiences. I'm like, this is real. And, the funny thing is when I saw his picture in your documentary, it made me think about that time in his book where he said, I think I'm going to go travel to the White House, right? So astral travel and remote viewing are kind of close in hand, and they may involve the same things. And when he got there was some type of agent that said, in the astral realm, that pretty much told him the government, the president, you can't speak with the president right now. And he asked the question in his book. He goes, I wonder just how much they know. And if they do know, or do they have teams that work in the astral realm? Do they really guard them? And I was like, whoa, that's kind of trippy to think about.
That actually just gave me the chills. I mean, that just gave me the chills, man, because the thing is, Russell tells that story in reverse. And really? I'd never heard that story. I haven't read that in Bob Monroe's work. And Russell says, this is actually one of the extras on my YouTube channel, and it's also on iTunes. You can get it. It's one of the extras that come with the film. Russell talks about breaking into the Kremlin. Wow. And he actually took their most inexperienced remote viewer, Hella Hamid, who was brought into the program as a control subject. She was brought into somebody CIA wanted to see somebody that had never done remote viewing, that was not psychic, to run as a baseline against their best psychics. So Russell says, well, I know my friend Hella. She's a Life magazine photographer. She's kind of well known in the art world. Never done remote viewing before. Doesn't know anything about it. But let's bring her in and test her. And she turned out to be statistically the best psychic they ever worked with. She got better results than Pat Price. I mean, she wasn't like able to read and stuff like the way Pat could, but statistically, she got amazing results. She's the one that I said went to Egypt and drove a stake in the ground right where the buried temple of Alexandria was, and they were tasked to go and look at Brezhnev's office in the Kremlin, and Russell kind of like walks her through this whole thing, and it does work kind of like an out of body experience, but it's with two people, and both people are very aware and conscious of their surroundings, in the physical, and Russell acts as a tour guide. The monitor of the remote viewer acts as a tour guide. It's kind of like she says, okay, well, I'm in the office, but it's dark, I can't see, and then Russell says, okay, well, I'm going to turn on the lights. And so now, and then she says, oh, okay, now I can see. And so it's like, this was like a dual connection between these two people where he was giving her permission to be more and more powerful psychically, wow. And Yeah, he was, and that's kind of the relationship, and why you have a monitor and why you have a remote viewer is the remote viewer is acting as a tour guide and keeping the subject on track as to like what information they need to get, and their goal was to just describe Brezhnev's office and what did they find there, and Hella is psychically walking around and she says, I see a red leather door with these brass upholstery tacks on it, and she says, well, I'm going to open the door so you can go in. Okay, so the door opens. Okay, now I'm in the office. I see, the Onion Dome Church is outside. It's night here, which made sense because it was, several hours different from where they were. And she says there's a hidden door behind the desk, in a bookcase. And he says, well, let's open that door and let's go down. So they open the door, and then Hella psychically, sees herself going down these stairs. She says, oh my gosh, it's a giant computer bay here. There's all of these computers here. And at that point, Russell says that he got really frightened because he felt another presence.
Yeah.
And it was like they were being blocked by someone guarding the place, basically.
They've been recruiting defenders the whole time. That's right. What I always think, like that's what Robert Monroe was asking. They got their own team in there protecting everything.
And why not? Why not? Like a huge part of the U.S. program was counterintelligence. So it would make sense that why don't you task someone that does nothing all day long but remote view the area around the president to make sure that the president is safe. I'll tell you another thing that Lori Williams told me. The current day kind of remote viewing instructor that I know. She said that she was told by some of the Army people in the program, Lynn Buchanan, I believe, is another one of the known Army guys, that it was forbidden for members of Congress or the president to accept gifts while they were in office from foreign dignitaries, not just because it could be considered a bribe or something like that, but even small things. They were accepted, and then they were put into a special room, and they were left there because until they were already out of office, and then they could claim them. But if somebody gives you a magnet or a bottle of wine or a set of silverware or something,
that makes me think about magic a little bit.
Yeah. It's very similar to magic. It's very similar to magic because and this was a technique that was used by both U.S. and Russia. What you do is you create a marker, and you're sitting someplace and in a lab, and the scientist says, okay, now you're going to stare at this bottle and just create a marker out of it, and then you're going to always know what's going on around this bottle, and then that bottle is given to a politician. That politician gives it to the president. President puts it in the White House office, and all of a sudden it's almost like you have a psychic bug in the office where you can kind of pick up on impressions about like what the president's feeling like today, like what's going on in the office, what are they looking at? It's a Trojan horse. And so purposefully high level politicians are not allowed to accept gifts from foreign dignitaries and things like that. They put it aside. I found that fascinating, because what it says about sort of how susceptible, we can be. And it does sound kind of like magical. I mean, I've been to a person once where, he's able to take a wallet and look at it or a something you carry around in your pocket and then give you impressions about that are related to the energy of that item,
right.
And it was uncanny. And, there's a lot of fakery too. I mean, there's a lot of people who will do cold readings on stuff in a group setting, and that's easy to fake, but not those so specific. And get this, years after that event I was talking about with Hella and Russell got invited to go speak at the Soviet Academy of Sciences, in a public manner, like, not to talk about classified work, but just as a general scientist. I mean, he was still undercover at the time, and one of his handlers that was with him while he was there said, is there anything you want to see? And he said, sure. Can I see Brezhnev's office? So the guy, so he got escorted in, and they actually showed him Brezhnev's office. And Russell looked around the room, and there it was, the big red leather door with the brass upholstery tacks, the bookcase behind the desk, most likely where the secret door was, windows on the right, and like the certain kind of desk that she described quite accurately. And he was able to confirm all those details, which I thought was a great capper to that story.
You got to think right now, you could be describing probably one of the most secret rooms known to man right now. If you think about it, that is amazing. I think that it did make me think about that when Robert Monroe mentioned that in his book, and I can't stop. That is one of the biggest questions I can't stop thinking about. You know, you listen to a lot of these shows, Lance, and they talk about we're being controlled by esoteric things, and you hear all these different control mechanisms, from reptilians to archons to everything. And for a skeptic, it's like, man, it sounds comic booky. But when you dig into the data, like your documentary shows, the implications of what just humans can do, I mean, they literally could have their own super, I guess you could say, X-Men, so to speak, if you want to look at it that way, we don't know who they are. They're constantly guarding the president and other things, that are constantly doing secret missions. I really have a feeling that that's going on, just based on the questions and implications of all this.
I think that we could be correct in that assumption. I think that it's just not done in the same way that it would have been done back then. It's done much more sort of in very, very dark places of the government, or through private contractors. It's kind of the Blackwaterization of this kind of a skill. But then again, you can manipulate people all kinds of ways. I mean, you know, social media is rife with misinformation. It's rife with foreign governments trying to like influence us as Americans. It's just become part of the morass and the noise of social media. So there's a lot of ways you can do that, but there are reports of that kind of stuff maybe being happening psychically, not through the remote viewing program at SRI. The Russians were much more interested in that. Let's just talk completely esoterically for a minute. This is just speculation in my opinion, but based on sort of my own research into a lot of different areas, I would say the only thing you have to worry about, it's just like FDR said, fear.
Fear, that's the barrier.
The only thing you have to fear is fear, because if you are completely coherent in your thoughts, you know, if you are a balanced individual, you know, who doesn't fly off into outer space on all these topics, but tries to stay grounded in the here and now. If you're a genuinely, fairly happy person, I'd say it's incredibly difficult and pretty much impossible to do you any harm. You know, and the evidence of just even hypnosis or suggestion and those types of things says that, because if you already are feeling down and depressed and you know, may want to do some kind of a negative thing, and somebody gives you that suggestion, you're probably much more likely than somebody who is already very grounded and coherent. So the goal, if you're worried about that kind of stuff, is don't stress. Just don't stress about it. You know, like don't you know, because it all comes down to our own belief systems. It's like psychic abilities, period. They found this for sure in the lab. It's like they had to give people a permission slip in order for them to be effective in this kind of an ability. If they chose not to believe in it, then it was impossible for them if they were open to the idea.
Such a good advice. I mean, even in all the mystery schools and so-called mystery teachings I've studied, they teach that fear is the barrier to everything. It closes doors. It keeps you from exploring. It keeps you from doing so many things. And then even if you look at it in the way of reactions and comparisons, John Anthony West told me he told me a very profound thing, that if you let someone control you, if you react to things, if somebody does something or whatever, and you're constantly a reactor, then whoever is doing that is your master, if you really think deep on this. So you're right. I think that we kind of just need to tap into our own being and be happy with it, you know?
Yeah. And this is the same thing that every great religion has said. Again, every great master, you know, through the ages, you know, is, you know, it sounds cheesy, but it's true. It's like if you are in love with your life, if you are in love with yourself, if you are in love with the people in the world around you, you're not going to do any harm. And the odds are nobody's going to harm you either, because you're not even on their wavelength. You're just like doing your own thing. And there's an incredible amount of power in that. You know, it's like it's kind of like, are we going to live in a world where we choose to be victims? And I think Einstein said this. You know, he says the biggest question that science can figure out is, do we live in a cold, heartless universe where we're all victims, or do we live in a universe that is actually rooting for us to succeed and that is looking for us to expand our awareness of itself? You know, and
I totally agree with you on that. And here's the thing about that fascinates me about astral travel and remote viewing both is in their experiments. For example, like Robert Monroe saw he would travel to his neighbor's house, and he saw a woman handing out playing cards, so to speak, right? But when he called him and found out, they were really envelopes. Things like that keep happening. I think is that what you noticed? Like the more detailed they try to get with the descriptions, the more off they were, or how accurate did they get?
That's a great question. And, I asked several people, including Joe McMoneagle, who was the best Army remote viewer. This guy won a Legion of Merit Award, which is the highest award you can get in the U.S. intelligence services for his service doing remote viewing for the military. I asked, he's now running Bob Monroe's Institute. He married Bob Monroe's daughter, Nancy McMoneagle, people call her Scooter. Because he was sent to Monroe Institute to train with Bob Monroe, actually in out-of-body experiences. And I asked Joe, what's the difference between an out-of-body experience and remote viewing? And he said, remote viewing is when you take the entirety of your consciousness. It's like the end of the spectrum. You're actually leaving your body completely so that you have no physical sensations. You're actually at another location. Your consciousness is somewhere else. He says, but remote viewing is much more contained in sort of your physical form, and you're just taking impressions from that other environment, and you're able to look at it more globally. So you're not literally standing there in an out-of-body experience being blocked by somebody who's keeping you from being blocked, like you said, like Bob Monroe at the White House. You're actually able to get kind of like more of an overview of the whole thing, because it's like looking at it's the difference between looking at a computer browser and using the internet to Google something and sort of like playing a game like Second Life, where you're an avatar and you're actually in this like imaginary world. Because he said out-of-body experience doesn't really work for remote viewing, because everything is so vivid and you're actually contained within this space of wherever you are. You may be looking at the wallpaper or how beautiful the sky is and forget all about what it is you're supposed to be doing. Whereas remote viewing, you're just on a very specific task, so you're just using a portion of that energy. And any time that people sort of try to look into the future or the past or look at specific things, it's not literal, never. It's like you're like Russell says, the worst thing you can do in remote viewing is be literal and label. Like, as soon as you start saying, oh, for sure, he's got like some playing cards and this is what I'm seeing, it's like your conscious mind acts as a filter system, and it's filtering things through what you know and understand. So you're sort of getting an impression, the way that you would if you were playing a video game that was designed by you and how you see the world, because that's your interpretation system. But when you sort of use remote viewing, that's why they always tell you to draw it, because a lot of times, like when Russell did a remote viewing in Russia with this this lady that's on the extras you can see on iTunes or on my YouTube page, she drew these like pointy things like a triangle and this thing that kind of looked like an eye. She had absolutely no idea what it was. But it turns out when you compare that to the photo of what she was supposed to be looking at 6,000 miles away in San Francisco, it was an animal's eye and the pointy ears of a horse on a merry-go-round. And that's what the guy had taken a picture of. So she nailed it, but she didn't understand it completely. So it took that outside information to bring that. And you have to leave it open for that kind of thing. As soon as you start to try to like completely predict it, your ego kicks in, your sort of imagination kicks in. And I think this applies most of all to like the big money predictions that you hear people make. Oh, the comet is about to strike. We're all going to die. The tsunami's coming. The wave's going to wipe us out in, next month. Like all of those predictions are, it seems almost like the bigger they are, the harder they fall. It's like, and you see it even when you go back and look at the work of like Edgar Cayce or Nostradamus or any of these great prophets. It's like, I don't want to give people the impression through our film that just because this was real, that every psychic prediction is real. And the next time somebody says the sky is falling, run for the hills. That's not true.
Yeah. There's always an end of the world thing going on all the time. It seems like.
Right. Right. Now, if every single psychic on the planet all gets the same thing and they're all packing their bags, maybe then you would listen. But most likely, even when a remote viewer looks at something like nowadays, what's real big is what's called associative remote viewing, which is you associate an image with something else, to get a result. Like if I say, Joe, I'm going to show you an object tomorrow. I'm one of two objects, and that's going to say whether or not the Bengals are going to win that football game, that's happening tonight. So imagine what I'm going to show you tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. and draw that. And they do these kinds of experiments, and somebody would draw, say, an apple, another guy will draw a pancake. Well, if the guy draws an apple, that means the Bengals are going to win. But so often remote viewers will draw perfect interpretations of the wrong thing. And it's almost like they're able to look into the future and see both possibilities. Bengals win, Bengals lose. It's not a foolproof tool that you can use to predict the future. It's sort of like nothing is written, and maybe even the act of you observing that changes it. So you go to a tarot card reader, that tarot card reader puts out some cards and says, gee, looks like you might be in for a big financial struggle coming up, and then you're like, oh man, that's terrible. I need to start saving my money. I'm going to, change a bunch of things in my life. And all of a sudden you're no longer on that timeline anymore because the act of your observation has changed the outcome.
Wow.
Psychics always tend to look at the biggest splash in the psychic pool. So if somebody says, like Edgar Cayce, famous prediction, he says, part of Japan is going to fall into the ocean around the time of the 21st century. There's going to be a massive earthquake. Millions of people are going to die. This whole part of Japan is going to go underwater. Well, we all know about Fukushima, and we know that there was a big tsunami, a big earthquake in Japan. For a little while, it went underwater. A lot of people died. It wasn't millions. He was sort of right, but it's like the probability of like all of those millions and the massive world-destroying earthquake faded over the years, and he was just seeing sort of the biggest splash in psychic space, and so it's not 100% accurate. And I actually, again, just esoterically, I believe that we get a vote, because sure. The minute you hear about something, how you interpret it and feel it and observe it actually, gives you an equal say into terms of like what's going to happen next.
I think that's our power, Lance. Sorry, I'm getting a little bit of a signal issue here. But I think that's our power because I've heard this in many ways. I've heard Thomas Campbell talk about different timelines. I've heard, different choices like in a video game. I've also heard other people talk about how esoterically, when they talk about the angels are permeating reality in the thrones, when they talk about the Kabbalah, and then you look into physics and they're like, yeah, well, there's this, or quantum physics, well, there's this constant error correcting code going on all the time. Mm-hmm. So it's like, we're the ones making the choices. I see what you're saying.
Yeah. It's like, that is the biggest thing that came out of all of this work that was done for the government, is that our scientific model is not accurate. Like we've done this so many times now through history where we think we've got it all wired. We've got it all figured out. And the thing that science keeps forgetting is consciousness. Your observation, the fact that you're looking at it affects it, and there's a lot of studies that have been done that show that. And it's not usually a big effect, but if it's there at all, then we have to reinterpret what we view as sort of our basis for science and even for reality itself. So that's a very, very hard to sort of swallow pill for science. And I think it's also a big reason why this isn't more widely accepted, because again, you can't pin down consciousness. You can't quantify it, and I don't think that we maybe ever will. I mean, I think at a certain point, this just becomes about our own personal interpretation and our own personal experience. And, we'll see where it goes. I don't know.
That makes me think about disclosure. We keep wanting to hear the government tell us that there's aliens, that there's these projects going on. But I think if we learn to tap into this more, like you're talking about, we really don't need anybody to tell us. We're probably going to figure this out on our own through evolution or whatever.
I'll go even one step further and say that people who are waiting for disclosure, it's kind of like you're waiting for a phone call and your ringer's turned off, because it's like you're not paying attention to the information that's directly in front of you. I like to say that I think that consciousness is sort of viral, and there is no limit to how far your consciousness can go. I mean, this was shown again and again and again. The Soviet Union tried so many times to try to figure out what the mechanism to psychic abilities was. Like, is there a type of energy that leaves your brain? Is it like a radio wave? Are you transmitting some sort of a signal? And they would try all these different things. But it was proven again and again and again that there was no material explanation for the way that consciousness works and the way that something like telepathy or ESP or those types of things work. They just weren't able to figure it out. And if it's the case that Ingo Swann can go look at Jupiter 6 months before the first probe gets there and understands what's going on, what's to stop him from connecting to Alpha Centauri or to another galaxy? Or who knows where, there's no limit to it. And if we were a really advanced society where you take the sort of data that has been gathered now in this over about 100 years of different laboratories and extrapolate that forward, 100, 500 years even. And this does become just part of us as a race, as being human, as being on this planet with the rest of the biosphere, then communication between us and an extraterrestrial culture would be a given, and it would take place every single time that you imagine you want to have a conversation. And the danger in that is, again, your imagination kicks in, and this whole idea of balance and sort of a proper setting, and not getting carried away with it. But when you take into account that you can see anywhere, and not just see, but actually possibly create a two-way conversation, then our whole sort of deal with like big, huge radar antennas and radio waves and SETI, like looking out into space for radio signals and not finding anything. Well, the reason you're not finding anything is because that's about the most primitive, dumb way to look for another society that you can possibly come up with. Like they're not using radio waves. They're just using their own thoughts. And you see this bared out through contact testimony, like when again and again and again, people will say like, well, I heard a voice in my head, or I had this sort of a connection, or whatever. Well, if you're not going to discount everyone in history that's ever said that, then you can again extrapolate out that probably a more advanced society than ours figured all this stuff out already. And one really good reason why they don't show up in some big ship and land on the White House lawn is because we're probably annoying as hell. Because we don't have our crap together, we're sitting here, our minds are so chaotic, and if you're like empathetic at all and you can feel this kind of stuff, it's like we're like bad neighbors that blare heavy metal music until the 3 a.m. in the morning and throw wild parties, and they're like, damn, these people got to get their act together because it hurts talking to them.
Yeah, I keep talking about Robert Monroe because I'm more familiar with his work, but he talked about that too as he went on his travels, that there was some type of field that had a crazy, annoying resonance that was full of everybody's thoughts and fears and everything, and it even would push away certain entities and stuff because they just didn't want it. They didn't want that stuff on them energetically. They didn't want to deal with it. Yeah, it's pretty fascinating that you bring that up because he mentioned that as well. There's a lot of parallels in here.
Yeah, there is. There's a ton of parallels to the UFO sort of disclosure movement and to remote viewing because, it's like if I psychically run around yelling fire in a crowded theater, and all of a sudden I'm freaking out everybody. And like, why do you want to have a conversation with somebody whose thoughts are so incoherent that they can't even recognize that you're even present or there because you're not there physically, you're there in sort of a state of consciousness. And this is really, it boils down to sort of the most fundamental questions as to who we are and who we want to be as a society. And again and again and again, remote viewers will report that if they do this long enough, they start bumping into stuff. They start bumping into extraterrestrials. They start bumping into other civilizations. And the problem with that is that it's easy to prove if there's a Soviet beam weapon being built, and a guy draws a schematic of it, you can point the satellite and prove it. But you can't prove it if somebody's talking to, another intelligence that exists on another planet, because you can't verify that. At least we can't. Maybe somebody in some deep, dark aspect of the government can. I don't know. But it's certainly a fascinating thing. And, for instance, there's a talk that Joe McMoneagle gave on YouTube at MUFON a few years ago. And he talks about how when he was in the military, he would often be handed, a photograph of a satellite image of like a UFO or something. And some scientists would walk in and say, can you please just describe what this is? And in particular, can you tell us how it is that it's getting around? And he didn't know what he was drawing. He didn't know exactly what he was describing, but they would leave happy. And so what if, this is a big what if, all of this sort of disclosure thing and all of the sort of the skepticism of this is in part because you can actually remote view stuff, not just in the future, the way that Joe McMoneagle would if he was looking at product development, but what if he was looking at the UFO's propulsion system and how that works? And then that was able to be extrapolated out and then back engineered. It is true that Hal Puthoff, ran a remote viewing program, and then he went to work for the company that used to be doing the UFO threat assessment program. And Hal has written some fascinating papers, by the way.
Really?
He wrote, he's a very good theoretical physicist, and he's written papers in anti-gravity, in theorizing how UFO propulsion systems can actually work, that they're actually not moving super fast when you see a fast walker shoot across a radar screen, which happens all the time.
Yeah.
They're actually bending time and space. So they appear to be moving really fast to us and even to be materializing and dematerializing, but it's actually because they're bending gravity, and which in turn bends time and space. So he's written some really heavy papers, and some of that stuff has been classified. That he works on. It's like you can see the titles of the articles and stuff, but you can't have access to the whole article. And if that's the case, then how do we know that remote viewers aren't actually actively working on that subject of sort of not disclosure, but sort of just inclusion of the knowledge from other cultures that are beyond our planet? It's incredibly possible, and actually I think they'd be dumb not to.
Right. Yeah. I got to make up for this past break. We blew right through it. I couldn't help it. We were getting into we're getting heavy into the CIA stuff. So we're going to take this break. We're coming into the last parts of the show. So if you guys want to call in, now is the time to ask your question. It's 1-800-588-0335. You can text into the show at 501-777-5631. We'll be right back with Lance Mungia, thirdeyespies.com. Go check it out. Be right back.
Sorry about that.
Hello, this is Vance Nesbitt. Take the time to expand your mind by listening to Lighting the Void with Joe Roop right here on The Fringe FM.
When I'm done running with the wolves after hunting down a half-ton bison, I look forward to a mind-teetering escapade evening on The Fringe FM.
Want to know what's on The Fringe FM? Check out our schedule at thefringe.fm.
Poor water quality is a major health issue, and it's only getting worse. Municipalities can't keep up, standards have dropped, and pollutants are increasing. Where does it all end? It ends by keeping the pollutants outside of your home with HydroCare's advanced systems available at Wave Home Solutions. No less than the best purification materials and processes have been developed by HydroCare to provide you with healthy, clean water for drinking, cooking, and showering. HydroCare far surpasses the competition in removing chlorine, odors, iron, lead, chemicals, limescale, and much more. Don't settle for less when it comes to your water. We'll take care of the toughest water problems for you, whether it's from a city or well source. Satisfaction guaranteed. For more information, call 888-997-WAVE. That's 888-997-WAVE. Or go to bestwater123.com. That's bestwater123.com.
Wave Home Solutions for a healthy, comfortable home.
We've heard your feedback loud and clear. You called it out, and now we're answering. All new live programming, 5 nights a week. Always remember, the Fringe FM is for you, the listener, and we appreciate your feedback. Keep the feedback coming. You can email us at talkback@thefringe.fm, call the station at 501-777-5631, or send us a message on Facebook at The Fringe FM.
Occult Arcana is a balanced and objective guide to those subjects considered a part of the nature of light and darkness. Addressed in this text is a compilation of material that will provide new perspectives and awaken latent abilities that we all possess. The content herein shall provide magical sustenance for adept and novice alike, and will help strengthen the cornerstone of mystic understanding and alchemical transmutation. If you are interested in this modern grimoire, you can find detailed information and ways to order by visiting www.thesecretteachings.info. Although esoteric and occult studies remain vast, they are rooted within a universal philosophy that is difficult, if not impossible by finite terms, to explain in words. Language places restriction and erects barriers to understandings. By this it is to be understood that there are some things man should consider far too sacred to profane with definition. For these concepts and the manner by which we live our lives, we shall take a note from the Greek philosopher Pythagoras. Quote, "Silence is better than unmeaning words." End quote. To get your autographed copy of Occult Arcana today, simply visit www.thesecretteachings.info or email The Secret Teachings at rdgable@yahoo.com.
Hey, is that a new music app?
Yeah, check it out. Surfer Music Discovery. It links to thousands of online stations, but the twist is you see the song names and artists that are now playing live.
That's different. No guessing. Looks like a waterfall of music.
So many formats. Rock, oldies, country, R&B, jazz, and a whole lot more.
How's that spelled?
Surfer. S-U-R-F-R.
Is it expensive?
It's free. No need to sign up or sign in.
Get the Surfer Music app free from Google Play or the App Store.
So, you love talk radio? Then you'll love TalkStreamLive.com. TalkStream Live is always on, 24/7, with the best streaming talk shows. Find your favorite talkers and discover some new ones. It's free, readily available online or on mobile with any smartphone or tablet. Finding your favorite talk shows all in one place has gotten a whole lot easier. Just go to TalkStreamLive.com. Be sure to download the free apps from Google Play or the iTunes App Store.
Hey, Fringe FM listeners, did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or no Wi-Fi available, you can still listen to every minute of the Fringe FM by calling 701-719-3971. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. Saves your data plan and no extra cost if you have unlimited minutes. Call 701-719-3971. That's 701-719-3971. Listen to the Fringe FM on any phone, anytime, anywhere.
Welcome back to Lighting the Void. We're here with Lance Mungia from ThirdEyeSpies.com. Lance, now, do you have to go to iTunes to get the extra content? Is that the only place you can get it?
You can get a lot of exclusive content on iTunes. The other place you can see a lot of sort of versions of that content, actually some stuff that I even expanded from that content, is my YouTube channel. You know, youtube.com, Waking Universe TV, or just my name, Lance Mungia. There's a lot of great content. And I have like hours and hours and hours of interviews and stuff that didn't make it into the film. And there's so many great stories. And I'm going to be putting a lot of that stuff out weekly on my YouTube channel in coming months. And the idea is to just really kind of build that up and create a subscribership that's really interested in this kind of an issue, because a lot of this was about me sort of preserving this for history. So I see, I just really want to get all of it out. So you can definitely go to YouTube and subscribe to my channel, and you will find some really cool stuff already up there, and a lot more to come.
There's a pretty good texting question here. It says that, Lance is, and I, we were talking about greater awareness of the subject, but in turn means more observers, hence more instability in the field, quote, so to speak. Would it be better, especially in the CIA's interest, to keep the information vague, stabilizing the observation field, I guess, and would it make it more effective? That's a pretty good question in theory, maybe.
I actually think it's exactly the opposite. I think that the CIA or any government agency always wants to protect their secrets. Not only do they want to protect their secrets, they want to avoid ridicule or, the appearance that they're doing something weird and crazy. But on the other hand, in terms of psychic ability, or in terms of remote viewing, in terms of being able to sort of use your own consciousness to go someplace else on a spectrum from astral projection to remote viewing to anything else, the more people that know about this, the more people that this is out there in the world, actually makes it a stronger effect size. This is borne out. I'll even plug my own film for a minute and say, I believe that the fact that this film has gotten out into the mainstream, the fact that we are on iTunes and Amazon and Google Play and YouTube and everywhere worldwide, that actually kind of acts as a wormhole, a gateway into greater not just awareness of psychic ability, but greater awareness, period. It actually makes everybody exposed to it more psychic. Like one of the extras that I'm putting out on my YouTube channel, this is not on one of the iTunes extras. I'm actually working on this right now in the studio, is a little mini documentary on Uri Geller, who's a controversial figure. When Uri Geller went on TV and in front of an American audience for the first time, he started bending spoons. Edgar Mitchell started getting all of this mail from concerned parents around the country. Edgar Mitchell was an Apollo astronaut who was in our film, sixth man to walk on the moon. And parents from around the country started writing in and saying, I don't know what to do about my kid. He saw Uri Geller bending spoons on TV, and all of a sudden he's sitting in his bedroom bending spoons, and it's freaking me out. And it's like as if when everybody watched Uri Geller bend spoons, something clicked in their brain and went, oh, maybe I can do that. And of course, children, Jesus said it, be like little children. Well, he probably meant don't have a bunch of preconceived notions and keep an open mind. And so some little child, looks at a spoon and then is able to bend it. So what does that say about sort of the viralness of all of this? I love talking about the, Rupert Sheldrake experiments and, the 100th monkey effect where, 100 monkeys on a little island figure out how to use a certain tool. And then all of a sudden, every monkey in that species, even if they're on islands that are far, far distant and never saw those first monkeys use that tool, they too can use the tool, because it's as if our consciousness is viral. And when somebody gets a good idea about something, it just kind of spreads. So you get something like one guy working on the radio on one continent, and all of a sudden on two other continents, people are developing the radio at the same time, and it comes out within days, or the airplane, or pretty much any really great innovation that comes down the line. Ideas sort of just spread virally. So if all of a sudden we as a society accepts the fact that ESP is not just real, but actually potentially useful, and we can kind of get over our own sort of fear-based kind of, anti-psi stuff, because you can actually be psychic in reverse. You can actually be psychic to the point where you will consistently get the wrong answer. I've seen it happen even to me because Russell has an app where you can actually download on an iPhone something called ESP Trainer, And he originally developed this for NASA. It's a four choice random number generator, and you're supposed to predict what number is going to come up next.
Oh, cool.
And over time, you can actually – it's a free app. I don't get paid for mentioning it. It's just something that Russell wanted to do basically for the world. He was like, oh, here, hopefully people can use this. And he developed it and put it out. And that actually is one of the extras. It's on YouTube and also on iTunes. And when you do this, you get better and better results over time. And it's kind of like just by having it out there, the more people that embrace it and use it, you get a better result. But when I first tried it, you're supposed to get like 25% or something. And I was consistently getting like 5%. And I thought to myself, oh man, not only am I not psychic, but I'm like the worst non-psychic person on the planet. I'm like horrible. And Russell goes, no, it's not that you're bad. What you're getting is actually statistically impossible results. You're actually using your psychic ability because you're skeptical, and you're actually forcing yourself to get the wrong answers again and again and again. So, psychic abilities actually can work in reverse, so it's so trippy to talk about, but I really think that the more people know about this stuff, the easier it is for anyone to do, because it's sort of like when the template exists. I put up a PDF file on the internet of how to do it, and then everybody else copies that PDF file, and now it's in everybody's brain and everybody knows how to do it. That is really, I think, the biggest sort of plus of a movie like this, because it's an easy way. You don't have to read a whole bunch of books and all this kind of stuff. You can just hear it straight from the horse's mouth, right out of somebody's mouth that it was actually there, and you can look at the data, and it'll open up your mind, I think. And
I totally
the result,
agree with you. I think even in our beliefs, and when a whole bunch of people, it's kind of like the archetypal thing too, right? When a whole bunch of people believe something, the more people believe it, the more people use it, the more powerful it becomes. I don't know how important that it needs to be that. Well, I guess it's important. Like, is it real or not? But the practical thing about it is it becomes more powerful. It works more.
Mm-hmm. The power of belief, the placebo effect. I mean, all of that stuff has been borne out again and again. Russell Targ's daughter was a well-known medical doctor at UCLA Medical Center, and she also was a researcher following her father's footsteps, Elizabeth. And this is also one of the I don't think this is in the extras. Yeah, maybe it's in the extras, but I did an expanded version on YouTube of this story. She accompanied Russell on a lot of his experiments and stuff, and she got very interested in the idea of remote healing, distance healing, and the power of prayer. And so she found that, like, when she had a patient in the hospital and she'd have like half the patients there, and she'd send like a file out to like a church or a church group, or even like didn't even matter what the denomination was, or if it was like a Christian church or a Jewish temple or a Native American tribal gathering. She tried all of these different kind of groups, and she found that statistically the people who were prayed for would get better. The people who weren't prayed for did not get better, and she found this again and again and again. And it seems like when you get a group of people together and they have like a mass intent on something, that mass intent kind of goes out into that field, and it actually creates an outcome, So, and actually, unfortunately, she actually passed away of a very rare form of cancer that she happened to be studying at that time. She actually contracted the cancer, So, no. It's too bad because she died in her prime. She was a very, very knowledgeable person, but it really just says something about the, even like the 6-minute mile. Like we're nobody on the planet can break the 6-minute mile. One guy does it, and then somebody else does it. Yeah. Now it's like, no big deal. So
it says a lot about our barriers and beliefs right there for sure. I just wonder this, and I'm not sure. Like, I know you don't know every single detail about everything, but this is my own curiosity, is because I'm a big fan of Monroe. Do you know what parts he did other than just the studies that at Stanford? Do you know if he participated in anything else?
Oh, he did many, many experiments. I mean, they did a lot of experiments at the Monroe Institute. being able to put people into meditative states and then get them to alter their heart rates and not just or for instance, like they would put someone in an isolation tank, have them focus on a person in another room, and then they would maybe like shine a light very quickly in the eyes of that person, and the person that they were focusing on in another room would have the same dilation of the pupils as if they were seeing the light. Like I'm kind of paraphrasing the experiment. That's not exact, but something like that.
That's really cool.
Yeah. I mean, it's like there's the Monroe Institute is known for a lot of work over this for many, many years. So yeah, they do a lot of interesting work there.
I'm fascinated with the implications of it because, okay, I'm sure you're familiar with who Whitley Strieber is, right? When he came on the show, my whole idea of Whitley Strieber was he's the guy that had the big story, wrote Communion, had the big story about the alien abductions. His wife passed away, and he wrote a book about the afterlife revolution. So I was like, oh, cool. He's getting into spirituality and the esoteric. Well, after talking to him on the show and researching a little bit and listeners chiming in, I found out later he was doing lots of esoteric stuff, and he had been to the Monroe Institute many times. And I was like, maybe he really did tap into something. So this whole UFO alien abduction entity thing, I think a lot of people think they come from other planets or systems. I really feel like they are just tapping into something that we're just now learning. And and this is all theory, but they're able to move through consciousness and all of these different fields. Because even Whitley said, I think it's something different now. He has different opinions about what happened to him now.
Sure. And I think that it's, if you look at some of the underground evidence about this and you talk to like some of the experiencers, and I'm actually considering as one of my next projects, something that involves remote viewing and the UFO phenomenon as at least part of that, and just dealing with kind of issues of consciousness and extraterrestrial cultures. And when you talk to people who are experiencers again and again, they say very similar things. They'll say stuff like, well, they're very concerned about us, and they want us to sort of it starts to sound like a self-help group. It's like, well, they're worried about like our sort of state of our emotional feelings and this kind of stuff. And it's like, again, it's like we're avoiding this like fundamental part of ourselves that suggests that when we're in a more coherent state of mind, when we're actually more loving and more caring about each other, that maybe it makes all of this other stuff that we deal with in life easier to deal with, and maybe even it actually has tangible effects on our reality. And they get that, they know that, and it's not the kind of thing that you can go and just tell somebody and they're going to get. You have to have experienced it, and so I think that's a lot about it is sort of more and more people coming to that kind of understanding. And I do think it is sort of the same thing. Like the more people that get something like that, the easier it is for other people to pick up. It's viral.
Yeah. And it's also very hard to believe in something that to us seems wild until we've had our first experience. Like, for instance, and it's not that I don't believe in, I'm open to anything, but it's something about the experience that we go through that makes me believe in things more. And I give you an example, like things like magic, astral travel, remote viewing, and UFO, and finally UFOs. I've had experiences with all of that, like my own experiences. But when people talk about cryptids and Dogman and Bigfoot, I haven't had any experiences with that, right? So my mind goes, and I always ask myself, why? How could I do that? How could I go, and while I've had all these other experiences that are just as equally wild.
But it should make you go, like all of it should, because it's like you can't lose your sense of discernment. Discernment is so important because you're the one that gets to decide for yourself whether something like remote viewing is real or anything else. That's actually, I think, a large part of the fun of our film is to sit there and go, like, what? Is this real? Is this really happening? And then making up your own mind by the end of the film, and it's like but again, like Russell loves to say, I don't believe in ESP any more than I believe in lasers. I know that if I turn a laser on, that laser is going to have an effect, and I can see that effect. So the same thing with remote viewing. I can see it, I can touch it, I can feel it, I can understand there's an effect there. I don't know about Bigfoot because I haven't seen Bigfoot, like you say. I haven't. Right. But if you can at least be open-minded, then you can sort of take with a grain of salt everything that everyone is saying, and then you can sort of make up your own mind about it. And that's the way that life should be, right? I mean, we shouldn't be so set in our ways that we're not open to the possibilities, but at the same time, we also shouldn't be so completely open that like we accept everybody that says anything about anything. We have to make up our own minds, and that's where discernment comes in. And because I think that there's a grain of truth to a lot of things, and there's also a lot of sort of people, maybe even organizations that are out there that might use that grain of truth to actually conceal the bigger truths. It's like the Mayan priest who stands on top of the pyramid and says there's going to be an eclipse, and there is, and everybody thinks he's like a god or something, but really he just really understood astronomy and the way the world works and had all of this extra information, and he was using that to empower himself over other people. And you don't want that.
Right.
You want to be an equal co-conspirator with all the stuff that's going on and be able to make up your own mind. And I'm always a little bit wary when people say I have all the answers, because nobody has all the answers. Nobody knows anything. All we know is that we don't know everything. And the more you experience this kind of stuff, you kind of go, oh,
the more doors.
I thought I had it figured.
Up. Yeah.
Right. But it is like our film is kind of like a gateway drug in a way, because it's like it does open this up and go, yeah, there is something to this. Okay. And so if there is something to this, what else am I missing? But that doesn't mean that the evil alien overlords are somehow going to, come down here and beam you up and take you away or whatever. I don't think it's that simple. I think if you were looking at extraterrestrial civilizations, it would be kind of like looking at us right here. You got like basically on this planet, you got decent people. You got people that are have their ups and their downs. Most people are not serial killers. Maybe you have a couple of serial killers out there, but they would probably not be nearly as prevalent as the ones that are not quite that malevolent, because I just don't think that you can live a long time as a society and be out to kill everybody or to hate everybody. I mean, just we're already at the point where at any minute somebody could launch a nuke and this whole planet could go up. And I think that is a major reason why you have so much interest from sort of extraterrestrial places, just even according to the anecdotal, evidence from pilots and, credible people that see UFOs all the time. Why is it that there's so much interest in this planet right now?
Well, I hope you do make a documentary about UFOs and remote viewing, because even I was very skeptical about UFOs, even though I talked about them until, you and I were discussing this on the break. A friend of mine came out here and he had some night vision goggles, and I was like, oh, cool. I get to look through night vision now for once. And, I could even see stars that I was never able to see before, all kinds of cool things. And then you start seeing all these movements of things you never saw. And I was like, okay, well, that's a satellite. That's a satellite. Maybe. I don't know. And then one goes, makes some kind of weird move. And you're like, what is that? Right? That's not a satellite. And now you've had a UFO experience. So now all of these doors open up literally in your mind that were closed within seconds. Crazy how it works.
But I'll go even one step further and say that probably whoever was up in that thing that went is probably the least advanced, because the most advanced would be kicking back on their lawn chair or something on their home planet and then just kind of like reach out with their consciousness and go, hey, what's up? And would have no need to even use a ship, because, they had already figured out the fact that the speed of thought, and intent travels much more fast than any ship ever would, and if they had a ship, it'd probably be just to show off and say, yeah, we can do this, but we don't need to, because we can talk to you in your dreams. We can talk to you in your imagination. We can probably talk to you through cinema, and through books and things like that, because people tend to just pick up on the signals and nobody really knows where it's coming from. If I get a really great idea for something and I write that down and it turns into an award-winning novel, well, did I just make it up whole cloth? Was I sharing that information from another source? Where does it end? Because the evidence suggests that consciousness is not confined to our brain. So that means that it's a skill that is always on. We're always using it. And usually when we're calm, we're centered, we're in that zone where we're being really creative, whether we're washing dishes or we're making an art piece, it's like we may be picking up on stuff from who knows where.
Right. Yeah. Recently they just did some experiments on the human brain and found out that these things were moving around in our head wirelessly. So I think they're learning more and more that we're kind of like antennas pretty much. And
I think that's a great analogy. It's kind of like, our brain is like the computer or a hard drive in the computer, and we have access to the cloud and through a wireless signal, and then from the cloud, it's like you have access to all other points in space and time. That's a really good analogy, in terms of like just using like a wireless antenna analogy is like, but here's another really interesting thing that this suggests. And it's another part of, I think, the documentary I'm going to do next is what does that say about the survival of your consciousness after death? What does it say about our souls really? Like if you're going to go down that route and say that I can experience things through astral projection or through remote viewing or whatever have you, that are not related to this physical presence that I have now, then maybe when we die, then there's that part of us that's out in the cloud. The stuff that even though the hard drive breaks and the computer shuts off, I had a backup copy up on the cloud, because I was accessing the cloud every single day. So if we're not really in space time in the way that we think in terms of consciousness, then all that information is still there. And there's so much evidence for that too. Yeah. And so that's another really interesting discussion that when you think about ESP and telepathy and this kind of stuff, it opens that up as a discussion. What if, when we pass away, it's like we stop being the particle and we become the wave.
Because when you turn the TV off, the signal's still there. It's just the TV's off. Yeah.
That's right. The signal is still there. And all it takes is a focuser, an antenna. How much time do we have left?
Oh, we got about 3 minutes to our last break, and then we only got like 20-minute segment after that.
Oh, okay. Well, really quick. I mean, like the wisest thing that anybody ever told me was a 7-year-old, and it was the daughter of a girlfriend that I had at the time, and we were on a trip, and she came in early in the morning to say I had a dream, and first my grandmother came to me in this dream and she said, somebody's here. She wants to see you. Is that okay? And I said, yes. And then and it was your mom. Your mom came to see me. And my mom passed away when I was very little. And she said, your mom told me, would you give Lance a message for me? And I said, yes. And she said, would you tell him that I'm everywhere, all around him? Oh, I'm in the air. I'm in the grass. I'm in the trees. But most of all, I'm in his heart. And to me, that was like the most beautiful thing, and it came out of the mouth of a child.
Yeah, that is amazing. Right. Yeah. That really is. And I've brought this up on the show quite a bit, Lance. When I think back to my childhood, I was tapping into all kinds of things awake, I saw stuff in my bedroom and, don't know if I manifested or whatever. And my dad would always tell me, it's just in your mind. And I think that's, and after we hear that enough, then it starts going away because we start believing it's not really there. And
it's absolutely true.
And it's gone,
Yeah, it's absolutely true. I mean, I think that, I was watching a talk that Neil deGrasse Tyson gave, and he said, kids are born scientists. They're born geniuses. They're constant experimenters. They're always learning constantly. And as adults, we tend to just like suppress that in them. We always tell them, sit down, don't talk, stop touching that. I mean, I'm guilty of it. I have a daughter. This happens. It's like, what are you doing? Don't do that. You're going to hurt yourself, but they pick up an egg and they drop it on the floor. Well, that's an experiment in gravity, and it's like, there's so many different things that a child does. And a child is so connected to, the non-physical because they don't yet understand the filters that sort of make people shut that off, and I totally believe that. It's like, just as a society, we sort of force the children to not accept this stuff. But that's why a kid might be watching Uri Geller on TV and be able to bend a spoon, because all of a sudden somebody who's legitimate made it okay. And now they can bend spoons. But then again, maybe their parents every single day are saying, oh, that's just craziness. You can't do that. Like this is we're all guilty of that. And yeah, I think it's just something that goes away. That's why I think so many children have like reincarnation experiences, things like that. And in some cultures, it doesn't go away because it's not seen as something scary. A lot of Aboriginal cultures, a lot of, sort of older cultures that have been around a long time just kind of accept it as part of who we are.
And they accept it as reality, that right? It's reality. Yeah.
And unfortunately, I think in the West here anyway, we tend to think of everything as black or white, right or wrong, incorrect or correct. It's all binary, and it's compartmentalized and it's separate. And again, that's just the model that I think that we're up against in terms of moving forward as a society.
Well, when we come back here in our last segment, I just want to talk a little bit more about the film. And I really, really want every one of you to get this film. Go get it, keep it, put in your film. I have it on my Amazon thing. I'm going to have to go over to YouTube and iTunes because I want to see all of it. But you guys go check it out. It's thirdeyespies.com. We'll be right back.
Out there.
There's something out here.
And so are we. KTOK Digital Broadcasting, The Fringe FM.
Hi, this is Sammy. Join us in the Deep South as we're lighting the void with Joe Roop on The Fringe FM.
This is Corbin and you're listening to KTLK, The Fringe FM.
Greetings, Galactic community. This is Suzanne Ross, host of Spy Radio, every Wednesday evening from 5 to 7 p.m. Pacific. Join me for this brand new show featuring a revolutionary new genre, Sci-Spy, merging science and spirituality to give us answers to the greatest mysteries of creation. Together, scientific discovery and spiritual revelation reveal the truth about who we are, where we came from, why we're here, and where we're going. Tune in to Sci-Spy Radio every Wednesday from 5 to 7 p.m. Pacific and discover the truth for yourself at thefringe.fm.
The Fringe FM loves hearing from you. Have a suggestion, comment, or question? We're all ears. Email talkback@thefringe.fm. Follow The Fringe FM on Facebook and Twitter at The Fringe FM.
This is Elle. I listen to Lighting the Void because it's interactive radio with good content, interesting guests, and a humble host, sharing his journey through the esoteric. Hey, Joe Roop. Thanks for having us along for the ride.
Thank you so much for a delightful evening.
Well, I got a lot of ground to cover.
The Fringe FM isn't just a radio station. We also provide services for all your audio production needs. If you are interested in live radio or pre-recorded podcasts, we're here to help. We even do audio enhancements and voiceovers if needed. If you want to do a podcast or live radio show and even want the option to syndicate on terrestrial radio, from simple audio file enhancement to live production and call screening, we have you covered. We have worked with some of the best professionals in the business in order to provide coaching instruction for content creation, show structure, and more. Contact The Fringe Digital Media for more at info@thefringe.fm. That's info@thefringe.fm. Or call 501-777-5631 for a consultation.
Folks, this is very important information. What's to be said about CBD? AncientLifeOil.com. Our CBD is made from hemp and has 0.003 THC, which means this wonderful product won't get you high, no matter what amount you take. What does CBD do for the body? My hands are tied. But you can Google CBD benefits and be astounded. When you're finished reading, you'll want to log on to AncientLifeOil.com. That's AncientLifeOil.com. and purchase. Life is good when you feel good. People are tired of pain. People are asking for non-GMO organic products to help them with you fill in the blank. Legal in 49 states, and again, our CBD is made from hemp. Ancient Life Oil is about helping people one by one by one. If you wonder how good the product is, the CEO takes it every day without miss. AncientLifeOil.com. That's AncientLifeOil.com. Have a great day.
Poor water quality is a major health issue, and it's only getting worse. Municipalities can't keep up. Standards have dropped, and pollutants are increasing. Where does it all end? It ends by keeping the pollutants outside of your home with HydroCare's advanced systems available at Wave Home Solutions. No less than the best purification materials and processes have been developed by HydroCare to provide you with healthy, clean water for drinking, cooking, and showering. HydroCare far surpasses the competition in removing chlorine, odors, iron, lead, chemicals, limescale, and much more. Don't settle for less when it comes to your water. We'll take care of the toughest water problems for you, whether it's from a city or well source. Satisfaction guaranteed. For more information, call 888-997-WAVE. That's 888-997-WAVE. Or go to bestwater123.com. That's bestwater123.com.
Wave Home Solutions for a healthy, comfortable home.
Hey, is that a new music app?
Yeah, check it out. Surfer Music Discovery. It links to thousands of online stations, but the twist is you see the song names and artists that are now playing live.
That's different. No guessing. Looks like a waterfall of music.
So many formats. Rock, oldies, country, R&B, jazz, and a whole lot more.
How's that spelled?
Surfer. S-U-R-F-R.
Is it expensive?
It's free. No need to sign up or sign in.
Get the Surfer Music app free from Google Play or the App Store.
All right, welcome back to Lighting the Void. I'm your host, Joe Roop. Don't forget, we will be here next week, Monday through Thursday night, 9 p.m. Pacific to midnight. And after the show, if you're listening live, The Secret Teachings with Ryan Gable will be on. We're here with Lance Mungia, the director and filmmaker of Third Eye Spies, thirdeyespies.com. This is, like I was telling you, Lance, at the beginning of the show, this is right up my alley. I know you talk about being skeptical and things of that nature, but your film made me realize that this is 100% real. I mean, there are things in the film that make you wonder about the implications, but there are other things that you watch and you go, yeah, this is so real. I mean, there's no doubt about it anymore. You did a very good job at that.
Thank you. And you know, before we made the film, I looked at a lot of what had been said about this kind of stuff. And there was a lot of stuff that said, like, well, they screwed up in these early experiments, and there was maybe some misjudging of how they did the remote viewings, and maybe the judge looking at the information had some clues and everything. But when I really got into this, I thought, you know, the stuff that they were really doing that had been classified back then is so incredible. It's so world shocking. And that it's not about, like, did they make some little mistake, or was the guy in the other room able to, like, read the guy's hand when he was drawing something and copying it on a piece of paper? No, we're talking about stuff that nobody in the world knew. Nobody, certainly in U.S. intelligence at the time, knew. And I've seen it again and again and again where someone will walk into our film and go, this stuff's so bogus. It's like, I don't even believe any of this stuff. And they walk out and they just kind of have this, like, puzzled, like, wide-eyed look on their face. And they're like, you know, I think actually I kind of believe this now. This is, like, incredible, you know. And I had a many hour long debate with one of my best friends who's a well-known filmmaker who very well respected, very much an atheist, doesn't believe in anything except for hard, solid evidence of anything. And he thought this was when I first decided to make this film, he said, "Man, you're throwing your reputation away." He said, "You're never going to make another film. This is terrible. Don't do this. I've researched remote viewing. I've researched ESP. I'm a fan of James Randi. You're going to just, you know, tank this thing." And I said, well, just wait and see the movie. Wait and see the movie. We had so many debates as the movie was being made. And then he finally saw the film and he went, I'm sorry, man. I think you're right. I think that, you actually did something here. I actually, find this to be very credible. And I think you changed my mind on this. And to me, that was the highest praise I could get. And I knew I was really onto something at that time because, this guy is like trying to change the weather. I mean, it's not going to happen. You got to just wait for it to go by. And he actually changed his mind.
You were talking about children earlier. And it made me think something about, we discuss fear and the barriers of fear. And we got all these epiphanies about it. But when we have children, we have real legitimate fears about things. Mm-hmm. And it's not, the more I think about it, it's really not the act of what they're doing. What we're afraid of is the consequence. Like, so if your kid is playing with a knife or something dangerous, it's not the fact that they are playing with the knife. It's the consequence that worries you, Mm-hmm. And, mm-hmm. Kids don't really understand that stuff. So you say, don't do that. Don't play with that. Or it's all in your mind. When it comes to the all in your mind thing, I think maybe we as parents should just go along with that instead of being afraid, right? Because we're worried about the outcome. Right. We're worried about not what we even think. We're worried about what's their teacher going to say as soon as they start saying something weird? Or what are their friends going to do? They're going to pick on them or whatever. Our biggest censors are always the people that are closest to us. We're not worried about what the CIA is going to say. We're worried about what mom's going to say. We're worried about what, are we going to get invited to Uncle Joe's, Christmas party next year if we start saying all kinds of crazy stuff, and we're also worried about the fact that, are we crazy? Is this just all nuttiness that we're talking about, or is there something to this? The guy that says absolutely, positively, I have all of the answers and I am 100% sane is probably what you got to worry about. Yeah. Even that attitude, I have a problem with that attitude. And I know some people are like that, but I've even had friends and people I talk to, well, it's this and it's that dimension. And they got answers for every little thing. And you're like, look, there's no way all this stuff is for sure. That's impossible. And you can't have that argument with them, so you just kind of let it go, I think. But I get what you're saying. Yeah, and at the same time, maybe to them, that is what they have come to, and that's what they have figured out, and that's fine. That's perfectly valid. But it doesn't mean that, I have to then stop searching because you've gotten all the answers for me. Third Eye Spies is not an answer to all of the questions. It's just a doorway to look inside the box and then see that there's something there and then allow you to go forward with that and then explore some other things, it doesn't mean you're going to go out and become a remote viewer. You don't have to remote view something, maybe that's not what you want to do, but it's something that at least you understand that the world's a little bit more mysterious than what you thought. And that to me is a cool thing. And I think that's also why we're doing so well on the iTunes charts and Amazon and, other places you can really find this film, because it's not about preaching to the choir. It's like if you're already on board with all this stuff completely, I think it's awesome. Hopefully you will go out tonight or tomorrow and purchase the film and, at least rent it and get an idea of the film. But it's really for people who don't know much about this stuff, so because it's because these are credible people. These are people who are legitimate, PhDs and career, scientists that have been looking at this kind of phenomenon. And, they've been very unsung. And in fact, I've even been to conferences where I'm shooting the podium and I'm speaking, a certain speaker is speaking, and then I'll, pan back to the audience to get a reaction, pan back to the podium, and somebody from the staff will run up to me and say, "Excuse me, please don't point the camera at the audience because the people in the audience really don't want to be filmed." And the audience is filled all with other scientists and reputable people who are here to hear this person speak about ESP. But there's still today a stigma, around all of this stuff when you get outside of the circles that we're in as we broadcast out right now, and that's a tragedy. There should be, access to this information, and people shouldn't feel like they were being belittled because they bring it up in polite conversation. Well, I will say this. I know about the one thing about the film is that it has an incredible power, at least for me it did, to help me make that decision. And I know that's not what you were trying to do. I know that you were just presenting the information and interviewing, but in my mind, after I watched it, it was something different than I've watched a lot of documentaries, man. And a lot of documentaries are like, okay, here's the story. Now you make up your mind. No, this is different, man. There were examples. There were stories that were validated by all these different people. And it was true journalism. And I think that's rare too, you know, and it was really good.
Dude, thank you. Thank you. Because that's the goal, you know, and, I started out making narrative films. You know, I mentioned at the beginning of the show, and I remember once somebody emailed me and said, you know, I really want to be a documentary filmmaker. Do you have any advice? And this was long before I even thought about this. Was like 15 years ago, 20 years ago, before I even thought about making a documentary. And I wrote this. I thought, oh, that's so nice that this person's reaching out to me for advice. And so I really thought about what does a documentary film really mean, and what is the power of documentaries? And I wrote this whole sort of 2-page letter back to this guy. And in that letter, I said, there's nothing more important than making documentary films. If you're making documentary films, you're actually showing the world something that they don't know yet. If anything, you're ahead of the curve, and you're able to influence in a way that narrative films can't, because this is real life that you're actually presenting to someone. And as I wrote it at that time, I always think back on this. I thought to myself, man, it almost sounds like I should be doing documentaries, because, that's pretty powerful stuff. And then I thought, there's no money in documentaries. Screw that. I'm going to go back to making action films, and that actually didn't really work out the way I wanted it to. So and over the years, I just, it's about taking something that is personal to you and sharing it with the world and giving the world a different point of view that they didn't have before. And I think our film, Third Eye Spies, does that. And I think that, it is something that you can use to ask yourself a lot of questions about what you really think about the world. I mean, I think it forces people to think. Sometimes people don't like to sort of form an opinion on something, and they like this kind of vagueness of not knowing, but when and then you got to move forward with that information. And I think our film is going to really open that up for a lot of people.
Well, I don't know if you're going to be able to top it. That's the thing. Like when rock stars or whatever, they come out with these albums, they don't know how big it's going to be, and then it becomes a hit, right? And it becomes a hit for a reason. But now you got to keep on doing it, right? So are you going to be able to is your next film going to be able to be as good as this one? I bet you think about that stuff too, especially when you're trying to go, oh man, now I got to tap into the alien stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
The benefit of time is that you have a lot of time to think and a lot of time to consider it. I spent a long time on this stuff, and you can tell just between you and me just riffing here that this stuff fascinates me. And I think that as long as I find it fascinating, there's so many different aspects and things that we haven't even talked about that are so interesting to this stuff. And it's sort of like, you feel like you're onto something, and there's some truth to what you're doing. And it's the difference between somebody who's just paid to do a job and somebody who is doing it because they really love it. And I love this stuff. And no matter what I do, it's like now a part of my fingerprint as to who I am as a human being, and as who I am as an artist, and where I want to go forward. And so, I feel like I've gotten this sort of master class in making this film, and I'm able to kind of share that master class now with your audience and to everybody that's listening that hopefully goes out and sees this film. And it's just the start, it's just a way into sort of these types of subjects. And it's all so much more related. Like I said, the UFO phenomenon, astral projection, magic, remote viewing, all of these things. There's good parts and bad parts. There's provable things and unprovable things. There's a lot of philosophy involved. I'm just looking forward to whatever comes next. I mean, I think there is. See, I have the benefit of old age. I'm not that old, but I'm not that young either. And I've been around the merry-go-round once before. It's like I have had other film work where I was sort of the flavor of the moment, and then it kind of flitters away, and you're sort of a journeyman and you're trying to get work. And last time around, I think I spent a lot of time worrying about what other people think. and what to do next. And oh my gosh, the pressure and, agents and managers and studios. And, am I still going to be able to top this or whatever? And, Third Eye Spies, I think, speaks for itself. It's fine. I think, I've put enough effort into it that, it shows my work as an artist, and I'm happy with it. I haven't always been able to say that about a lot of other things that I've done in my life. There's been, it's like sometimes you do something and you just go, man, that was a train wreck. And I at least I got out alive. I'm still alive. I'm still kicking. And, and the main thing is it doesn't destroy our souls, to have to go through something that is a negative experience. And it's been a very positive experience in my life and for me just personally. So it's changed me, frankly.
Well, I will say that I did get some comments in the Fringe FM chat that some people actually did like, six string samurai and the other stuff. Yeah. So I think
I love Six String Samurai. I think it's a great film. I mean, I'm not trashing, anything that I've done really. I'm just saying that was really cool. I had a good time making a film like Six String Samurai. It was a long time ago. I think the film still holds up really well, but it's that was done by a filmmaker who was really young and hungry and looking to prove themselves. It's I was already auditioning to make the first Star Wars film. I was auditioning to make X-Men. I was like, I really wanted to do a big action film. And I think that held me back as a filmmaker, because I wasn't able to figure out, I was telling other people's stories. Fellini says, somebody asked Fellini, Italian filmmaker, did tons of movies on circuses. They said, why do you make all these movies about circuses, man? How come you're a talented filmmaker? Why don't you go do something else? And he said, because I understand the circus. I know the guy's shoes. I know this. I know that. I know everything about the circus. And so, and it's that's so important when you want to be an artist, is that you sort of understand what you want to talk about. And I like what I'm talking about right now. So hopefully that'll continue. And, I'm not opposed to doing something else either, but I'm happy and proud of everything that I've done creatively in my life, because it's led me to this moment, both for good and for bad. All of the things that you go through in life, hopefully they make you better at what you do and a better human being. And I think that Third Eye Spies is something that I can be proud of, and that hopefully you will enjoy if you watch it. Hopefully people will write reviews. That's super important because we're not dealing with a large marketing budget here. Back when I was making films, 10 years ago, the industry was completely different. It was all about billboards and TV. And now the power of the word of mouth is 1,000 times stronger than trying to get a TV ad. Yeah. I mean, you listening to this right now can go on your Facebook page tonight, or go on Twitter, or go on Instagram, or go on your email or whatever, and notify 10 friends, hey, check out this new documentary I just heard about. Let's have a party at my house tomorrow night and watch it, whatever. And that generates more interest and more positivity around the film than anything that I would get out of spending thousands of dollars on the radio or TV or anything else. I'm blown away by that. The last time I made a film, there was no, podcast like this. There was no Facebook in the form that it's in now, and so it's a different world for me now, with a little bit more wisdom, going into this and realizing, holy crap, I have a little studio here, with some lights, a couple cameras, some people that know how to do stuff, and the knowledge that I'm now bringing to the table, and we just created something that is, on in the top of the charts on iTunes right now,
and there's this book by Stephen Pressfield. It was one of the first books I read, called The War of Art. Right. And he talks about resistance and failure and all of these things. And when I listen to a podcast, or I watch a movie or a documentary, your documentary, Third Eye Spies, reminds me of what Stephen Pressfield, he talks about when you really come into what you're supposed to be doing. I could really kind of tell that when I watch this. I could tell that with a lot of things. Is this just a marketing thing? Are they trying to, is that it? Or is this really a work of art, like a soul type thing? And that's what this one is. It's for the truth seeker that wants to know this stuff. And I don't know what else to say about it, man. And everybody knows my show. I don't push a lot of things really hard unless I really believe in it.
Oh man. That's one of the nicest things that I could possibly have said to me right now. Because again, I was not paid to make this documentary. Like, we did not have enough budget even to pay anybody for the span of the time that it took to make this documentary. I had to teach myself how to do a lot of things. I composed a lot of the own music. There's a really interesting story though that is in the extras, both on iTunes and on YouTube, called "Music from the Fringe." Funny enough, Fringe Radio, but it is about a group of young college students and some composers and a music director at a college in Idaho that came together to actually remote view music for the film. And they had done it once before. I talked to them and I said, we'll give them something that give them like a picture of Napoleon, because I want kind of a vibe like this on this one thing, and and then they just went away, and they basically had these cellists get musical impressions psychically as to like what the music would be, and then write all that down, and they would give them different targets for different songs, and we incorporated that into the movie. And they did it just to do it. It's like there was no big budget to do this or anything. They just decided they wanted to do it because it was fun, and it works out great in our film. This has been a labor of love all the way around, and I'm just happy that now people actually get to see the film, and that I get to share this with your audience, and I hope they like it.
Well, I can't wait to see the next one, and I'm glad that I got this in my collection. And you guys can go to thirdeyespies.com to check it out. The extras are on iTunes. There's extras on your YouTube channel, right, as well? Yes, yeah. YouTube has a lot of stuff on it, and I'm right now actually releasing something every other day or so. Because there's a lot of stuff that's not just like an interview, but actually like cut like kind of mini documentaries, expanding upon the events in the film. So you actually get to see, something might be getting mentioned in passing in the film, and I kind of blow it up and make it a larger sequence, because there was just so much material that was so rich. I could have cut 3 documentaries completely differently and told this story in different ways, and it still would have been really interesting. It's just I just picked sort of, I thought, the most well documented and most exciting stories to actually be in the film. But yeah, there'll be a lot of stuff in addition that's coming out to this. Well, in the age of the internet, there is no doubt that you're right. The word of mouth is the big thing. I got you on the show because I have a section in one of the chat rooms called guest suggestions, and yours came up. Bam. And they said, Joe, please, check this out. And then I did immediately, and I jumped on it as fast as I could. That was all word of mouth. That is awesome. That is awesome. Thank you to whoever did that, because I'm really glad I was on this show, because it's a great conversation. I hope we get to do it again soon, because I just love talking to you, man. This is awesome. Yeah, I can't wait. Can't wait to see what you're going to come out with next. Thank you again for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. Yeah. And thank you to the audience, too, who's already seen it, for purchasing it and who's considering it. Please check it out. LanceMungia.com, ThirdEyeSpies.com. Lance Mungia is the director and filmmaker of Third Eye Spies. ThirdEyeSpies.com, the YouTube channel. I want to make sure that I say that right. The Waking Universe TV, right? That's what you're on YouTube. YouTube.com/Waking Universe TV, or you can just type my name into YouTube and the channel comes right up. And if you go to ThirdEyeSpies.com, you can get DVDs, you can get Blu-rays, you can get pretty much all of the links are there for iTunes, Amazon, anywhere else. You can also just type it into the search engine. It's also on cable services worldwide. So if you have cable with video on demand, you can download it at your home right now. It's there. It's there. It's waiting. Go grab it, guys. We got to roll out of here. But don't forget, we'll be back next week, Monday. Next, NEXT's coming on. The Board Camp Crystal Mine people will be back out here, a few surprise guests, and also don't forget that this show was produced by The Fringe FM and cannot be re-syndicated without written permission, and music was by Chronox, Space Station, Kevin MacLeod, Guitar Man by Bundy. We'll see you guys next week. Good night.
expressed on this program do not necessarily reflect those of the Fringe FM, KTLK Digital Broadcasting, its sponsors, affiliates, or staff. Listener discretion is advised.
We told you weeknights on the Fringe FM are now even better. And we mean it.
Do it live!
Where else can you hear the best shows and the best talent? Kick off your evening with our newest host, Alex Exum, live at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 Eastern. Hang out with me, Joe Roop, on Lighting the Void at 9 Pacific, midnight Eastern. Ryan Gable expands your mind on the secret teachings at midnight Pacific, 3 a.m. Eastern. We're bringing the heat every single night. Fire it up, the Fringe FM.
Yahoy there. This is Gigi from Shift Happens. And holy shit, you're listening to KTLK, The Fringe FM. Hey, don't you dare from that stuff.